Well, after a little bit of a technical delay there, we are now live. Welcome, folks, to today's coverage of the first ever round of an ambitious new series with the High Caliber Community League here at the dawn of the Karussell Cup. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us here for the first of 3 visits to the Nürburgring Nordschleife right here in round 1 of 3 of the championship. It's going to be 3 different divisions over the course of the season for the next month and a half here at the mighty Nordschleife. With the original circuit introduced in 1927 and the overall N24 layout that's seen today introduced in 2002, it's 170 miles and 170 quarters, I should say, and 15.7 miles of FIA grade 3. Not 170 miles, Jesus, no, Lord, no. One of the largest tracks in existence and the largest continually standing racing course. The Nürburgring Nordschleife is an iconic venue known the world over for its prowess in motorsports. Home of the N24 and former home of the German Grand Prix. We find ourselves, though, at one of 3 rounds here today, with the first being the M2 Cup division here on November 29th. Then December 6th coming up will be the dawn of the GT4 division for 75 minutes here at the Nürburgring, and then GT3 on December 13th. All sessions to begin at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. We're on board at the moment with the 413 of James Mason. But let's take a look very quickly into the event regs and get a scope of the vehicle of choice today. Well, looking at the event regs, it's a 2020-60 format, much like we saw prominent use over the course of the former GT4 Challenge. 20 minutes of moment, which we're at the moment in free practice, 20 minutes of qualifying to follow, and a full 60-minute hour-long race. With 1 mandatory pit stop involved for both fuel and tyres, it seems to be the going rate that it'll be a 20-20 and then a variable race time. Of course, 75 minutes for an hour and 15 at round 2 and an hour and a half or 90 minutes at round 3 at the season finale. Addressing some ongoing issues at the moment with PlayStation Network. Of course, there was a little bit of a hubbub about whether or not the race would go ahead today amidst a myriad of issues that have seen races such as the upcoming 6 hours of Silverstone on NLRL has been suspended today, and to address that, the folks at HCCL have made the following statement that due to surrounding issues with PSN, a drop round will be introduced for the Karussell Cup, likely to be this one today here in the M2 division. A lot of PlayStation players sadly will not be able to join us today, so we're looking at a crowd of Xbox fans. And the 413 at the moment up the field at the moment is James Mason among a myriad of cars today. We see also in the pit lanes at the moment Thomas Ferre, Asahi Ota, who was the runner-up of the GT4 Challenge, went toe-to-toe with Christian Lebay for the championship, with Lebay sadly not able to join us today, currently tuning in from our Twitch chat as he is himself a PlayStation player and sadly cannot connect today. It leaves Asahi Ota out there with no seeming competition. That could not be 100% the case, and we are yet to see really what the entire grid is capable of today behind the wheel of these titular M2s. It is the first time ever on TRTN that we have seen the BMW M2 CS Racing take to the track, and it's a punchy little motor. I've been quite a soft spot fan for the M2 since its introduction in the mid-2010s. The specific model to take to the track at the moment, the M2 CS, was introduced in 2019, features a modified race-ready variant of the BMW S55 inline 6, producing up to 365 horsepower with an upgrade available to go upwards of 450. I believe we're seeing here the 365 horsepower model, and that's currently connected to a 7-speed double-clutch sequential gearbox. It's BMW's smallest and lightest coupe on sale, the little brother of the M4 and the direct successor of the lesser-known BMW 1M series coupe. The M2 is a phenomenal little motor, appraised as one of the best modern BMWs ever made. Right now, it's the host car of the first of 3 rounds here in the Karussell Cup. We're on board with Rafael Bayer on his way through the Adnar Forst. Now, in terms of data for qualifying predictions, sadly, we've come up empty-handed, so heading into qualifying today, it is the wild, wild west with these M2s, and we'll really be able to see everything play out live with very little foresight as to who to expect up front. But there's a lot of new names joining us here for the Karussell Cup, names that we will have to become accustomed to, as a lot of them are not the ones we're seeing returning from the GT4 Challenge. Rafael Bayer is among them. Looking around the field as well, we have Pascal Stolz. Now, we have seen Pascal Stolz before. I believe he has competed some time back. It was either NLRL or exclusive. I can't tend to remember here. We also have returning faces as well. Stephen Sutton was quite a prominent figure in driver of the day in the latter rounds of the GT4 Challenge. We saw him with Mercedes, now we see him with BMW today. Matthew Copsey also back behind the wheel. We've seen him across both HCCL's GT4 Challenge, but also elsewhere on HCCL. He also competes in the Formula 1 division. Right now, he'll be seeing quite a foreign experience here in the titular little M2s. Out on track at the moment, a new name, Mr. Scallops, in the number 394. Now, he's been in our Twitch chat quite a few times, and he's been in close contact with us over the course of the last couple of weeks, our sort of eye in the sky for all things HCCL, and actually for a few little tidbits of information regarding other series as well. So it's fun to see him out on track at the moment. The 394 currently making his way down through, I believe this to be Arenberg. Yeah, into Poststrasse, so yeah. James Mason, of course, we've seen in more series than we know to count now at this point. He's one of the most prolific figures in console sim racing at the moment. He's been really kicking around the block. I think there's more series that we've covered that he has been directly involved in than there are that he hasn't at this point. He has really gotten about. He is quite well travelled. The youngster who races for 5-Star Esports, the former K1 Esports team, now rebranded to 5-Star, makes his way down toward the Nordschleife section. Actually, no, he's going to loop back around. So this is what we're going to see a lot of drivers doing here. They take the full GP circuit as the warm-up lap. Of course, they're not expecting them to do the full lap of the Nordschleife to constitute just the out lap. So making his way back onto the GP section goes James Mason. Thomas Ferre, a new name for us here, the 84, on his way down through to the Ford curve. See Asahi Ota now firmly into the Nordschleife section. A little bit of damage on that 54, something to note there. We also have Casey Miles. Now, we've seen him quite a few times over on Competizione Performance League. We now get to see him as well here in HCCL. We saw him in the trailing rounds of the GT4 Challenge. I think we've seen him a lot more behind the wheel of the Jaguars as of recently over on Competizione Performance League. So behind the wheel of the BMW M2, it's a real learning curve here for the 96, the American making his way down through the Yokohama S's in the GP section. Now, I want to try and catch on board with the driver here, making their way towards the start of the Nordschleife section, and who better to get on board with than Matthew Copsey in the number 97. He'll be our unofficial tour guide right before the end of things here in free practice. About 9 minutes left to go. We're down into the Hatzenbeck section, right at the very start of the Nordschleife. Of course, 170 turns. It's the most amount of corners in a modern racetrack to this very day. It is an unrivaled venue at roughly 4 times the size of the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. So it is an absolute monolith of a circuit. So out through Hatzenbeck towards Hoheneichen. Now under the faster area here into the Kittelbacher Hohe up towards Flugplatz. In through Flugplatz then. With the M2s, they'll feel a little bit more of a degree of confidence compared to GT3 at the top end of things in a few weeks' time. As they'll definitely be able to take this area more than flat out. This is the real low end of the totem pole, 365 horsepower. These are as close as one feasibly gets here to a production road model. The M2 CS, of course, is underneath all of that flashy exterior panels, just a normal M2 with a body with a little bit of a body kit enhancement and a roll cage. Of course, there's a lot more to just that, but compared to, say, GT4 and GT3, we're talking a lot closer to what you can buy off the showroom floor. So out through Poststrasse towards Fuchsrohr and down towards the Adenauer Forst. Now, this is a really dicey section coming up here, and we've seen it over in GT3. I think we've seen just a little sprinkling of it in GT4s, I may be mistaken there, but in the M2s, again, they'll be finding a case here that this is probably the most confident they'll feel through these more tense sections of the track. Not only are they among the smallest cars in circulation on ACC, they're also probably the calmest to drive, especially of the cup cars in circulation, when you consider that it shares the limelight here as a cup car alongside cars like the Porsche 911 992, the Ferrari 488 Challenge, the Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo. So the M2 is really probably the most accessible car, and it's surprising when you consider that it's quite criminally underutilized in the world of ACC console. As you would have thought, for people getting into the game, wanting to get into ACC for the first time, this would probably be one of the best staging points, but there are very few championships that exist to facilitate this, and I think that's what leads to a lot of these culture shocks we see with drivers jumping straight in at the deep end into GT3. I definitely could see maybe a league to come through to introduce this as almost a rookie's cup car. This is a really fantastic choice of machinery. We see here, still on with Matthew Copsey, making his way now down towards, by looks of it here, from our slightly crooked map of the Nürburgring Nordschleife, he's down towards Exmüller. And the Ausfahrtbreitscheid in towards the run over towards Bergwerk. These are a lot longer laps than what we're going to expect to see in GT3. Of course, GT3 cars are capable of those 8-minute times, even scratching in and around a very, very high 7 minutes at the best of times. So these M2s, it's about 9.5 minutes per lap. So for a 60-minute race, really not going to see too many laps. And with any hopes here, since it is single make, and there is very little to distinguish one M2 over another, we could be expecting to see 60 minutes of, albeit much slower racing than what we're used to here on TRTM, but one that is going to be compoundedly closer. Down towards Mudkurve then, in towards Klostertal and Stahlstrecke. Heading up onto the section of which the series is named after, of course, the Karussell Karussell, possibly the most iconic section of the Nordschleife, making his way now down through Klostertal in towards Stahlstrecke. The 394 currently on the Dottinger Hohe, so that's Mr. Scallops currently out towards the end of his flying lap at the moment. We'll see what his times are. We're still on board there with Matthew Copsey in through then to the Karussell. This is the whole namesake of the season, and there you see the M2s through for the first time in a very elegant run there, all things considered for Copsey. So now up in towards Hohe 8 and the Hedwigshohe. Into what I would make the remark is possibly the best section of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Now, I'm not sure about the folks in Twitch chat at the moment, but this is, in my opinion, easily the best section of the track by a long shot. So in through towards, looking at it here, out through Hedwigshohe, in towards Wippermann. Little bit of a stuttering issue. We have seen the servers have been on the fritz for today. Not only have there been issues with the PSN connections, which has halted a significant chunk of the player base from being able to connect today, but now we're also seeing it slightly affect the servers as of right now. Out through Brunchen, then in towards the Eiskurve. Down towards Eiskurve he goes then. It's really a lot slower, a lot more methodical with these M2s. Now they're going to have to make the most of absolutely every ounce of momentum these cars can carry. I think you've got to start viewing them less as M2s, and really, if you're going to go by law of comparison, as we head there out through the Sprunghügel in towards Pflanzgarten 2, you've got to start looking at these when compared to the GT3s a lot less as M2 cups, more as like MX5 cups as your closest comparators, because the pace difference is just so drastic. As we see here for the 97, he's really able to open the taps on that M2 now, so it is starting to pick up a little bit of steam here on his way down towards, by looks of it here, Schwalbenschwanz. On his way down towards the Kleines Karussell. Three and a half minutes then left to go in free practice. And you see a little bit of an upset there for Copsey out through the Kleine Karussell. On his way now towards Galgenkopf. And on to the Dottinger. Out of Galgenkopf we go then onto the Dottinger Hohe, this large straightaway section we've seen made or broken for a lot of drives here in the Nürburgring over a myriad of seasons. But we see here for the M2s, this is going to be slipstream central. A whole slipstream train going to be carved down here through the Dottinger on that first lap. It is going to be a case where a lot of drivers, especially starting up towards the front of the pack here, are going to be hoping they're far enough away by the time they hit this section from one another, and moreover from the rest of the pack. That's of course what they're going to be able to leverage a good 75% of the entire track here to achieve that gap long before they hit the Dottinger. But if they are here, it could be danger for a lot of people involved. Out through Antonius Bucher and in towards Tiergarten, making our way towards the end of this flying lap, then on board with Matthew Copsey for a sort of unofficial breakdown of the Nürburgring Nordschleife N24 layout. We joined him towards the start of the Nordschleife section. Of course, we still have the conversation of the GP section, or the GP Strecke, as it's sometimes referred to as well, across the line in 9 minutes 30.350 by the number 97 of Matthew Copsey. A very solid lap to kick things off then in the M2s. It puts him 3 seconds up the road from Mr. Scallops, currently the only other time on the charts. We're still awaiting the arrival of another car here. That's Thomas Ferre on his way down the Dottinger. Not far from him, the 413 of James Mason. Out through Antonio Spucher, in towards Tiergarten he goes. The Frenchman in the 84. It's his first time here on our screens on TRTN. We don't know how long he's been with the High Caliber Community League, but it is looking to be an exciting performance today from the 84. A lot of new names joining the series, a lot of returning names as well. Now, among the new names, of course, we've seen Raphael Bayer, we've seen Mr. Scallops, we see Thomas Ferre here, who has actually called it quits right at the very end of his flying lap, didn't put a time on the chart, so we'll be waiting for the word here off of James Mason, who we've seen plenty of times across many different seasons. This is, I believe, potentially his first time in the M2s. Now, we've seen him before in the M4. He's a very prominent sight with BMW with the M4 GT3. I don't think he's ever took a step backwards into the veil of the M2, but as he crosses the line, sadly, it's to no time on the charts for James Mason. And this is going to be the utmost importance in qualifying, of course, with very limited time here. You're looking at laps in the range there at the top end of things right now, about 9.5 minutes. That really only gives you, looking at it, just about 2 laps if you really knuckle down, and that's a real stretch when you consider the margin for error here at the Nürburgring. It is possibly the most tense track we've seen for qualifying because it has to be played so differently to every other track. You don't have anywhere near the plentiful opportunities that other tracks bring to the table because each lap takes a significant chunk out of the qualifying time. I think the only other track we can realistically draw comparisons toward is the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, a track about a quarter the size of the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Right at the very end, though, of free practice. Across the line a moment ago went the 96 of Casey Malles, but not that he'll be seeing the rest of his free practice times. We wait to see drivers back into the pit lane for the start of 20 minutes of qualifying. You'll have to forgive the slightly more monotone afflection in my voice. I'm a little bit ill today. Winter fever kicking in, as it were. The number 28 at the moment, Raphael Bayer, on his way down through Brunchen. Not far from the run down the Dottinger. The question therein remains for the 28. Will he be seeing that checkered line, or will he be calling things early to give himself the best fighting chance for the run into qualifying? We'll see, though, with the 28 still one of the last remaining cars out on track. The only other currently on what appears to be a valid flying lap at the end of free practice appears to be that of Asahi Ota, on his way currently down towards, by the looks of it here, Bergwerk, in that sort of second sector. In through Flansgarten, heading towards Sprunghögel. Actually, no, he's well out of Sprunghögel there. He's in through Flansgarten 2. Down towards the Schwabenschwanz. You see here powering his way out the Kleine Karussell, and we see that's a bit of a routine issue. A lot of drivers getting washed out through the Kleine Karussell. We saw it with Matthew Copsey. Now we see it with Raphael Bayer on his way down towards Galgenkopf. On his way onto the Dottinger goes the number 28. There's a lot of potential, even with a smaller grid such as this. 60 minutes of racing to follow after qualifying today. The question therein remains, with a lot of drivers we know are more than capable talents behind the wheel, how close do we expect the pack to be staying when the race kicks off proper? Now, bear in mind, they've already got the upcoming excitement of the first lap coming out of the GP circuit for the start of the race. That is where we could expect to see a lot of position changes right off the bat, and then on the run into the Nordschleife, especially in through that opening section through Hatzenbeck, the Hoheneichen, the Kielbacher Hohe, Flugplatz Kottenborn, and then maybe I'd say the earliest attacking opportunities then come after towards Schwedenkreuz and Arenberg and Polstra. So that's where you could expect to see more moves be made. But that whole opening section of the Nordschleife, oh, it's just trouble there for Bayer right at the very end, towards Tiergarten no less. 20 minutes against the clock, and things are going to get dicey here. Leading early doors out of the pit lane. I think that's among the very rare number of times James Mason's been beaten to the punch there, because Matthew Copsey is first out onto the field for the M2 division. Down through to the Yokohama S's. Now, of course, they skipped the Mercedes Arena section in its entirety. We've seen plenty of overtaking opportunities come out of that section. They'll be taking a little bit more of an abbreviated route for the run through what is Sector 1 of the GP Strecker down towards what is now the run down the RTL towards the Ford curve. As we mentioned, sadly, no qualifying data, or at least insufficient qualifying data to surmise a realistic expectation of the top 10. So we are going into this one blind for the first round of 3, hopefully with more numbers to join us for that second round. Now, of course, those of you just joining us at the start of qualifying today, to reiterate an announcement made by Race Control, it was a case that due to surrounding issues including connection problems for PlayStation Network users, a drop round will be introduced for the Karussell Cup, and I'd say realistically that is going to be this one in particular, round 1. So depending on if their results get better or worse, this will be likely the round that is dropped away on the points contributions to the Karussell Cup Drivers' Championship. I'd say looking at this being more of a special event, there's less of a championship pressure to fight for. I think the drivers are definitely coming out with a bit more of a playful mindset about this, but that is not going to diminish the competitive spirit of the drivers today. We've seen what they're capable of under pressure. We've seen what they can do when the championship rides on the line. Now, with literally nothing left to lose, I think we could expect to see a lot more of a feral performance out of our drivers today. And starting things off a bit over-enthusiastic in towards the Vidal chicane. Matthew Copsey cuts across, but fortunately this is just the outlap for the 97, so he'll be starting his run on towards the first of the flying laps here. And I think that's the one good thing we've got here for the Nürburgring Nordschleife, is that you can just use the GP section and you aren't expected to do a full out lap of the Nordschleife, because that would cut the available qualifying time for a lot of the drivers here down to half, giving them feasibly a one-shot quali. So at least with this, it does give the drivers a fighting chance here. Out to the Yokohama S's then. Copsey and Mason, the first two drivers, on the flying laps. We also see not far off of their trails right now, by the looks of it here, the number 54 of Asahi Ota. We'll have to take a look around the field as and when the data updates. Right now, though, the talk of it is going on between Copsey and Mason, the two British drivers up front, the 97 and the 413, set to become the first two times onto the charts today. Of course, they have a long way to travel before we see either of them do so. We'll be checking in here just briefly with Asahi Ota, because he is on that verdict point here, making his way towards the Vidal chicane. Now, he does appear, at least according to on-track telemetry, to be on a flying lap. We'll see if that is wholeheartedly the case, as making his way, there we go, he is on an out lap, as evidenced by the fact that he's took the Coca-Cola curve and what is the final corner of the GP section. So checking back in with Copsey and Mason, they're in towards Bitten Warsteiner. We'll just leave you on board for a moment's time here with Matthew Copsey. We'll return to you in just a moment's time. So apologies for the interruption there. We're still on board with Matthew Copsey making his way at the moment down towards Friedenkreuz and Auenberg here in the Nordschleife section. With about 5 minutes burned into qualifying already, we see that having grown a bit distant from the field so far. The 413 James Mason appears to be invalidated. Now, we don't know wholeheartedly if that is the truth right now. As we exit Poststrasse on our way through Fuchsrohr and down towards the Adenauer Forst, we'll see later on in his lap as to whether or not that is the case. And for Mason, that could be dire consequences as it cuts his available number of qualifying attempts down to half. You see, though, for Matthew Copsey, this is a much more invigorated driver than what we saw in his sighting laps back in free practice. For the 97, he is properly throwing that M2 into every corner now. Definitely got a little bit more confidence now behind the wheel after feeling the sort of feel of the road and the feel of the car itself. I imagine for a lot of drivers, this is a very alien experience. Very, very few drivers, I know at least, have ever been behind the wheel of the M2s. It is a very enigmatic vehicle in terms of its positioning in ACC. Now, in iRacing, it would make a lot more sense. You have no short supply of cup cars. You can also use them in production cups, where they can race alongside other categories of cars like the Clio Cups, for example, or the GR Cups. But for ACC, it's a very odd choice because I think there's been one other occasion where the M2s have been used, and it was here in HCCL. If my memory serves correctly, it was used as one of the underpinning categories of the not multi-class endurance, the multi-class championship, I should say. Because the M2 was produced as a single-make Cup Series racer, this M2 CS Racing, but it does fall into the SRO TCX category. So very similar to some other Cup cars of its type, but weirdly enough doesn't fall into the same competitive wing as, say, for example, the Porsche Cups, or for the example, the Lamborghini Super Trofeos or the Ferrari Challenge. All of them are built distinct to their own set of regulations. This is seemingly the only one recognized on a wider spectrum by SRO. So it's a very bizarre little vehicle because it can't really fit in with the other Cup cars, and it can't fit in with the GT4s, and it's very rarely sighted along the GT3s, even in this game, let alone in real life where it is a nigh impossibility. All of the cars that it would be sighted alongside and have a decent chance of fighting alongside are not present in this game. So it is a bit of a lonely vehicle, the M2, and it's a real shame because I would be of the solid opinion here, just speaking from my own point of view, that this is probably one of the best cars BMW has ever produced. By a long shot as well. This was BMW really firing on all cylinders. They were in a bit of a slump in the mid-2010s. They were pumping out some questionable vehicles. For every one car they got right, they got quite a few wrong. You had the M4, the first generation M4, which was a phenomenal car in its debut. But then they turned the M3 into a four-door version of the M4. It always kind of felt benign to me that the M4 was what the M3 should have been, and vice versa. And then once they were doing that, then they made the i8, which was this phony supercar with a mini engine made about 360 odd horsepower, about the same as what's been made in these little coupes. And they retailed it for about 90,000 off the showroom floor, and I was thinking, well, who is this really for? It's not a sports car, it's barely in a supercar territory. You just whacked butterfly doors on it and called it a day. It's a very strange little car. And then after all of that confusion, BMW put this out, and then I think the whole world understood what they were gunning for this whole time. They were experimenting with a lot of different ideas. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But then they just did what worked, and this was it. This was the spiritual success of the 1M Series Coupe. It has been revered by all manner of publication and car reviewer as one of the best cars they have ever produced. And it's really not hard to see where that comes from. With the new M2 though, I'm not convinced. I'm not super keen. I think the redesign for the M2 has not done the car anywhere near as much justice. I think this first generation model, it looks tenfold better, and even the M Performance parts they added later on that you could purchase, that I believe actually came from the development of these M2 CS Racings, those look fantastic. But that new M2, I don't know what it is about. It's a bit try-hardy with that face, with the very squared off front grille intakes, and it's all a bit much. I think the M2 was a fantastic little motor when it was introduced, because you can see from what you're seeing at the moment, it's a lot more subtle for what is designed to be a performance coupe. by BMW. It's something that you could realistically purchase and it would not be astronomically garish to be seen driving in. But the new M2s, it's like a microscopic GT3, which is bizarre when you consider BMW already have a GT3 and it's not the M2. Oh, into the wall, interrupting our little BMW talks there. Trouble for Copsey right off the bat. That has sliced his qualifying endeavours down to, at the best of times, one more lap. A disastrous start then for Copsey here in the Karussell Cup. So getting on with James Mason as he makes his way onto the Dottinger. This could be make or break here for Mason. It's very rare that Mason has seen the front row. He's actually quite seen it recently in the Sunday League. But here for the M2s, could this be the perfect storm to give the British talent a pole position? Well, only time will tell, and he's got a long way to go here. Feasibly one more lap out of the rest of the grid, including himself on his way down through Antoniusbrücke down towards Tiergarten. This could be a huge, huge decision here for James Mason. Little kick over the curbs, but he's onto the grass there. So just as much as there's been trouble for Matthew Copsey, James Mason clatters the wall. So it does hand over the torch here to Mr. Scallops. Let's see if we can catch on board with him just before he hits the checkered line here. Down towards the line goes Mr. Scallops, number 394. Does he set a time onto the charts then? 8 minutes 26 seconds left to go, and across the line he goes, and a 9 minutes 31.472. So a dramatic shift there. Both Copsey and Mason, the front runners of this qualifying session, both make contact with the wall in the final sector of this lap. So to look at it here, we now have 3 times on the charts. Mr. Scallops up to what is currently a provisional pole position, 9 minutes 31.472 for the 394. Thomas Ferre most recently just crossed the line, the 84, now in second place ahead of Stephen Sutton in third. Nearest to the line at this time, the 172 of Pascal Stoltz. Let's stay on board with him here, see what he's getting onto. The 172 down through the Kleines Carousel. Down through to Galgenkopf. I do dread to think what the race is going to look like here, because we've already seen that drivers are struggling to shake that habit, and I think it's come foremost out of that attack of the curbs. And you could see where the idea was coming from both Mason and from Copsey. They're much more used to, you know, the slowest end of things they've driven we've seen as GT4, and we've seen that they've been very comfortable with what the GT4s are capable of. They know what the GT4s can handle, but these are simply put just not GT4s. This is much, much closer to a road car than a GT4 is. Of course, the GT4s are still production model race cars that are still underpinned by a real life vehicle, but this is much, much closer to that. Very little reworking has been done to turn this into a race car, especially when put up against SRO GT4s. And here comes Pascal Stoltz out through Tiergarten, in towards the run to the line here. Could he become the 4th time on the charts here? Now it's a 9:31.472 to beat. Currently closest by half a second, Thomas Ferre. To the line comes Pascal Stoltz, and he's fastest by a long shot, mind you. A 9 minutes 27.007 for Pascal Stoltz. What a jaw dropper. Right at the very end of his first flying lap. Next to the line just went Anthony Valorio, the 41, now 22.7 seconds off. So a little bit of a fluke of an opening lap, but with 6 minutes to the line here, he still has the chance for one more flying lap. What a turnaround, though, for Pascal Stoltz. He's 4.4 seconds up the road. Now, with a gargantuan track comes gargantuan gaps. I am genuinely surprised that even in the starting parts of quali today, we were able to see a gap in and around half a second. That's between Scallops and Ferre. But with Stoltz absolutely leveling their time and then some. 4.4 seconds on any other track would be unheard of. Nearest to the line then comes Asahi Ota. We've just seen, in the very similar vein to what we saw out of James Mason, Asahi Ota cuts over Tiergarten after running wide. That leaves him with only 1 lap to play with here. A lot of the drivers, actually a little over half the grid, have no times on the charts. And we've seen here beyond the point of no return is Casey Miles and Rafael Bayer. So that does leave a bit of a precarious spot for a few here. For the remaining drivers on the track, Copsey, Mason and Ota, to set times, they could stand at the best of it to be up in Looking at it here, probably about 5th place with Valorio's 22-second interval. It could even be north of that. At the worst of times, though, they'd be starting in what is currently 8th place. So let's go and catch on board with Mr. Scallops. He's the one furthest up the road right now, just on the exit of the Adnar Forest, on his way down towards Metzgerfeld and Kallenhardt. Christian LeBay in chat saying Kunos and their problems on console 2 or 3 times a year. I mean, yeah, this has been what, their second major issue after what the update for ACC that dropped a few months ago. It was supposed to be a livery update for the 2024 content, and I think it was for Xbox players specifically. It completely bricked the wheel compatibility, so a lot of leagues were forced to delay or forced to postpone, and this is no different. But I think this is less a Kunos problem and more a PlayStation Network problem. As someone who used to be on PlayStation Network before I moved to Xbox in about, I think it was about 2016 now, so just coming up on 10 years, it was just rife with issues. PSN, I still have a lot of love in my heart for PlayStation. I grew up on PlayStation. I had a PS3 when I was younger, moved to PS4, but it's the amount of insecurities that PSN has had, the amount of data breaches, the amount of downs, the amount of hacks, the amount of interval issues, the amount of disconnects. It no longer could justify being on it, even if it was free back in the PS3 era. And then they had the goal to charge it past PS4. I think that was kind of the governing decision behind why I went to Xbox in the first place. That and Forza Horizon 3 dropped, and I really wanted to play it. Still on board then with Mr. Scallops on his way down toward, by looks of it here, on his way through Kesselshed in towards the Mudkurve and Klostertal. And yeah, to address the point there by LeBay in chat is they don't, and this is as I'm quoting in quotes, they don't care at all with console sim racers, and personally I found that really disappointing. Yeah, it is kind of hard to feel recognized or seen as a console sim racer, especially when you consider how airtight everything is on PC. But I'd say, and this is a conversation I've had with a few people, it was a point raised to me. It was actually by 5-Star Jupiter, and I'll credit him for this because it really did change the way I looked at console sim racing, is we have a bit of a trade-off here in console sim racing. It is the fact that, yes, we don't really get as much recognition. We don't really get as much support from the developers because we're not of the priority to be doing so. But what we trade that off with is a community. And I think if we were to have cross-platform play with PC, I don't think, as a commentator, I would be able to give information on drivers anywhere near as accurately as I could right now. With a lot of the drivers I know the history of, I've seen their past work, and these are names you come to recognize, you come to see, you've seen what they've done in other series. I don't think you'd get that on PC because you trade off having a puddle as deep as the ocean as an ocean as deep as a puddle. I think that's where you get, and that's no discredit to the people on PC. I'm sure there are plenty of great talents in the right sort of circuits, but I think on a wider scale on what we have for console right now, you can see drivers competing in sort of little fun races all the way up to top-end races like the Console Endurance Series or the Pro Series, and they could compete across the board on that and you'd still be able to see them. I don't think you'd get that with PC, so I'm happy to take the trade-off that we don't really get the quality we ought to deserve. But I think we make up for that with the fact that it is a really tightly knit community. I've seen a lot of people compete in HCCL, the same people that I see the next day after competing in NLRL, and a few days later competing over on Competizione Performance League and perhaps even in VSR. I do appreciate that quite a lot. But it would be nice to have servers that work, or maybe PSN not, you know, brick itself every 6 or so months. So, out through the Schwalbenschwanz in towards the Kleines Karussell. Here comes Mr. Scallops. and on towards the Dottinger. Now, to bring up some of that telemetry right at the very end of qualifying here, it is looking to be a sizable improvement right now, though, for Scallops. By looks of it, not enough to take pole position. He needs upwards of 4.5 seconds. He's currently got 2.3, scratching on the posts here of 2.4 seconds worth of an improvement. Whether or not he can tie things up here down at Antonius-Bucher and Tiergarten is another question entirely. That could make or break this entire lap for him so far, but it is looking to be a confident defense of the front row. Will put him best in line for a chance to attack at the moment the leading car of Pascal Stolz in the 172 on our way into the first lap of racing today here at round 1 of the Karussell Cup. So as we see her down towards the line, very nearly in at the metal barriers there to the right-hand side, but using absolutely every ounce of leverage he can get down towards the line. It's 2.5 seconds up for Mr. Scallops. He crosses the line of 9:29.180. Sadly, not enough for pole position, but a valiant fight back there to put it 2.1 seconds between himself and Pascal Stolz. Nearest to the line then comes the 84. Here's Thomas Ferre to the line, 4.9 seconds from pole position. As he gets to the line, it's now 3.6, so another improvement there for the 84, but he remains in third place. Yet to see to the line here, the 172 again. Here comes Pascal Stolz on his way down towards the Schwalbenschwanz. On his way down on the exit of Flansgarten 2 in towards the Schwalbenschwanz, now in towards the run of the Kleine Karussell. On his trails there, you can see that's the 413 of James Mason. And then further down the line from him, the 41 of Anthony Villorio, currently lining up at the back of that top 5. It has been a bit of a crowd splitter and definitely some more precarious circumstances than one would have expected coming into this championship. Now, of course, we can't control what PlayStation Network chooses to do, and Race Control were forced on the spot here to make a bit of a split decision. May not be the case where everyone particularly agrees with it, but, you know, you get what you get now and you don't get upset. You got to play your cards when you're dealt them. On the way down the Dottinger Hohe, we still see here with Pascal Stolz leading this session by a long shot, 2.1 seconds. His fastest time right now at 9 minutes 27.007. It was a real jaw dropper there where we were looking at times at the end of free practice in and around the range of a 9 minutes 30 to see put 3 seconds on top of that. Pascal Stolz leading this session in the first qualifying of the Karussell Cup. Pardon me. So down through Antonius-Bucher in towards Tiergarten, following on his trail is the 413, but what appears to be, according to track telemetry, an invalid lap. So Stolz is on his way down towards the line. This was the same area that Mason found trouble, and you can see it's major compression. There's a dip there, and that ultimately sends the 413 around. A disastrous end to the qualifying for James Mason. For Pascal Stolz to the line here, it looks to be a confident, resounding pole position, and by then some. If you thought you were catching him now, think again. 9 minutes 24.465 for the 172 of Pascal Stolz. What a way to end your first qualifying session. Across the line then, James Mason still had a valid time there, so he got quite lucky to put himself up the road from Anthony Villorio. But as you can see, these two on both what appears to be fluke laps. This doesn't look to be the case now with the 41 to the line, 25 seconds away from pole position. It's short to close to the line, but not enough to get past Mason. So definitely a bit of a flash in the pan here for Villorio. 18.5 seconds away from pole position. Moreover, he's 7.2 seconds away from the nearest position. Nearest to the line right now, the 97 on his way down through Antonius-Bucher. It's Matthew Copsey. We saw had early doors issues in qualifying. This is his last possible attempt to put a time on the charts here. We saw him towards the front of the field today in free practice. The case therein with only a few more corners to the line. Can he even make true of the idea of a top 5 start here? Needs 2 positions to clear in the hopes that he's gone faster than James Mason. Let's see to the line exactly where Copsey positions himself. Is it 5th? It's 2nd. So more than enough at the end of qualifying here for Matthew Copsey. Taking that front row start off of Mr. Scallops. Those two divided by just under 0.6 of a second at the end of qualifying. Nearest to the line right now appears to be that of Asahi Ota. He's just on the exit of the Sprunghurgel in towards Flansgarten 2 on his way towards the Schwalbenschwanz. He's a long, long way from the line right now and what appears to be an invalid lap. We saw the same, though, out of James Mason. Currently still on track here, 6th place at the end of qualifying. So we'll stay on board here with Asahi Ota. Previously cited driving for Aston Martin, he was a real prominent mainstay of the GT4 Challenge. Now we see Ota back on the grid with BMW. We'll be likely to see him next round back behind the wheel of his iconic Aston Martin. Formerly the 55, now the 54 for this round of the championship. And potentially for the entirety of the Karussell Cup. So down the Dottinger we go. Let's get a look here on board with the telemetry out of the BMW. I am curious to see how fast we're going down this straight right now. That's 255 kilometers an hour, 256, 257, 258, 259. This is where it's going to get a little faster because we head onto that downhill section right before the brakes. About 265 kilometers an hour. So I wouldn't say it's not much of a slouch there. It has definitely got some pace, but I think that comes quite greatly in part of the fact that he has got 7 gears as opposed to 6. That's according to the technical regs submitted by BMW. To the line then comes Asahi Ota from 9th place across the line. 9 minutes 29.297. That's 4th fastest for the Japanese talent. The 54 on the 2nd row for the start of the Karussell Cup. So a great end to qualifying here. And so I'm told, actually, this is not the end of qualifying. I'm a little bit confused here. Hang on just one moment. We do have to check. Yeah, we were told it was 20 minutes of qualifying, but actually it is on the contrary. It's been 25 minutes of qualifying. So that is a little bit confusing for us here. We were not entirely clued in as to why that's been the case, or whether or not our timing equipment is a little bit out of calibration. But to give some brief update, it is not the end of qualifying, but it is 3 minutes left to go. So that does leave a few drivers still on the track with times to compete for. So our sincerest apologies there. We are a little bit confused as to why that's been the case. But we will try and get a look here. 30 minutes. So we were told 20. We were told 20 there. I'm a little bit confused on that one. Oh, wait, no. No, never mind. No. Yeah, this was something we were told actually about, I think about 2 or 3 days ago. Whereas a case where we have an extra 10 minutes of qualifying for the M2s, specifically the M2s, not for any other category. It'll be back to 20 minutes in the next round. So a little bit of extra allotted time because these are the slowest cars of the bunch. So, and with that, it is not the end of qualifying. That's embarrassing on our end, but there was a lot of last-second decisions to get this operation underway. We were on about an 18-minute warning as to whether or not we were going to go live today until the verdict was issued by race control that yes, round 1 would go ahead. So a lot of last-minute changes had to happen ahead of that, and part of that was a little bit of data lost in the way, and that was the extra 10 minutes allotted to qualifying. So it's not 25 minutes, it is, as a matter of fact, 30. On our original speculations, it was 5 minutes of added time. It was 10 minutes of added time. That does leave, at the end of it all, still a few more drivers left to submit their final times. James Mason is out on a flying lap right now on his way out towards Bergwerk here, on his way in towards the Kesselchen and Mutkurve sections, one of the high-speed areas in the middle part of the Nordschleife. So one of 4 significantly high-speed areas of the track, the first of which coming down towards the Kittelbacher Hohe and Flugplatz, Kottenborn, Schwedenkreuz and Arenberg section in Sector 1. Then you, of course, have the run from Kesselchen, Mutkurve, Klostertal in towards Stahlstrecke and Karussell in Sector 2. And then in Sector 3, the Dottinger Hohe, Antoniusbuche and Tiergarten. Right now, though, we're in the second of that. Actually, I would say also as well, sorry, that I said 4, the other one being in the bridgeway between Sector 2 and 3, and that's for the run out of Eiskurve towards Flansgarten 1, Sprunghogel, Flansgarten 2 in towards Schweden, not Schwedenkreuz, Schwalbenschwanz, I should say. That I would also consider a high-speed section, maybe to lesser of an extent than the other 3 mentioned before. So in towards Stahlstrecke, in towards the Caracciolo Carousel. James Mason on his way down towards Karussell. Now this is his last possible opportunity to put times on the charts here. As he makes his way around Karussell, he's made a little bit of a kerfuffle of that one. Right now, any kind of improvement is one worth taking note of. 11.3 seconds off of pole position. Needs about, looking at it here, 3 seconds to put himself in at minimum 6th place. And that's over Stephen Sutton in 6th at the end of quali today. A major upset there for him on the exit towards Hohe Acht. Down towards Hedvigsholm. Now, this is a make or break section, as we've seen several times before in a multitude of disciplines here on ACC. Making our way then in towards the run through Hedvigsholm, in towards Vipperman. This is going to be all or nothing out of Mason. We can see a bit more of a frustrated drive from the 413. Making his way down towards, by the looks of it here, Esbach, in towards Brunchen. Also out on track at the moment, not far from Mason's current position. The number 41 making his way in through Hedvigsholm at this time. That is Anthony Valorio in the 41. Out on track as well, joining us right at the very end of the session is Tom Wells, but he won't be setting a time on the chart, sadly. He'll be starting in plumb last, 11th place for the number 12. At least as far as we're concerned. Still showing that he is on an outlap, so yeah, that does appear to be the case. We'll see whether or not he is willing to run that risk and go on to the Nordschleife, and whether we've been shown up as a little bit wrong there. In towards Flansgarten 1 on the run down towards the Sprunghügel. Coming up here, actually no, we're on the so I keep getting that one wrong. I think it's because I keep mixing up Flansgarten 1 and 2. Sprunghügel is right in between the pair of them. That's that huge compression drop we see. In fact, if we get on board here with the 41, we might actually be able to catch it this time. And no, sadly, not the case. So we have to get on board with the 97. So look, this is where we've been getting everything wrong here. And I do have to apologize for the die-hard Nürburgring fans for me butchering which area of the track we're actually on here. On the exit right now, by the looks of it here, in towards Eiskurve. This is where we've been getting everything wrong. So this is Flansgarten 1. As according to the map. Then heading towards there. There you can see that is the Sprunghügel. This is this high compression jump section here. The car does gain just a tiny bit of airtime. And then we're on the run into Flansgarten 2. So I keep messing up where that is. And I'm glad that we're picking up on it now, because we've got 2 more rounds here after today's race at the Nürburgring. See, properly rocketing his way out, though. He's not leaving anything up to chance. On his way down towards the Schwalbenschwanz. Let's catch on board, though, with the 413. James Mason is looking for a sizable improvement. Now, this is where we're going to see that timer shift broadly in a separate direction, 1.5 seconds. And as we exit here, the run through Tiergarten, this is where you can see it just plummets in the opposite direction. 4 seconds, 5 seconds now. He needs about 6, I believe, to get himself up an extra position as he makes his way to the line. Is it more than enough for James Mason? Across the line he goes, and 5th, as a matter of fact. So what a way to end one's qualifying endeavours. 5th for Mason. He's up the road from Ferre and Sutton at the end of qualifying. Here comes the 41, though. Oh, and a bitter end for Valorio. Into the wall. Not a best way to start the qualifying sessions for the entirety of this championship, and definitely not a way to end one here in round 1. There you can see the grid right now. Pascal Stoltz on pole position, Matthew Copsey 2nd, Nesta Scallops 3rd, Asahi Ota 4th, and James Mason most recently into the top 5. Now, sadly, we don't have the overhead bulletin to our aid for this round. We'll get that fixed for our next broadcast, but we do have some articles of news. Oscar Piastri was on pole position for the Qatar sprint race in Formula 1, and also in the World Rally Championship it comes to a climactic end, as we see not only does Thierry Neuville win Rally Saudi Arabia, but Sébastien Ogier has done more than enough to usurp the lead off of his teammate Elfyn Evans, and has now taken a record levelling 9th World Rally Championship title. It puts him at level pegging with Sebastian Loeb for the most number of World Rally Championship titles. And I'm sure this has come at great dismay to the Elfyn Evans fans, and to Elfyn Evans and Scott Martin themselves, who were so close to a championship. Would have been the first British champion in 24 years. Sadly, Rally Saudi Arabia was absolutely savage on the poor Toyotas and ripped the tyres apart, leading to many an incident for not only Toyota, I should say, but also for Ford and Hyundai as well. I think one of the most prominent incidents to come out of Rally Saudi Arabia was Nasser Al Attiyah. His entire boot assembly and the rear wing came off in the first day of rallying on his temporary drive with Ford M Sport. For Adrian Formeau, it was definitely a peculiar day as he swapped hands for the lead with Martin Sesks of Ford. Not only that, he was handed a penalty for an early check-in, and then that was amended today on the last day of competition. So it's been definitely a bizarre one in the first ever running of Rally Saudi Arabia. I'd say that it is looking to be a very solid next run because it was a fantastic rally to watch. And if you aren't a rally fan, I would highly recommend watching any highlights you can get of Rally Saudi Arabia and also this year's Rally Paraguay, because both of them brand new rounds of the World Rally Championship have been a fantastic showcase of what makes rally such a captivating sport. But on to the topic at hand today, and it's for the grid of round 1 of 3 of the HCCL Karussell Cup. And we can see starting here on the Dottinger Hohe, just before Antonius Booker, we get the short run down to the line. Of course, we're not expecting our drivers to do that full run in the formation lap here at the Nordschleife. That would be quite literally torture for them and us. As we see now, looking at the grid, Pascal Stolz on a resounding pole position. It was domination from the 172 up the road at the moment for a front row start for Matthew Copsey in the 97. Mr. Scallops in third place with Asahi Ota in fourth, James Mason in fifth, and rounding out that third row is Thomas Ferre in the 84. He's in sixth place up the road from Stephen Sutton and Anthony Valorio, seventh and eighth for an All-American fourth row. Raphael Bayer in ninth with Casey Miles in 10th, and Tom Wells on a surprise entry starts in 11th place. Gives us a little bit of a smaller grid than we were expecting, but one must also consider the more readily apparent case of the PlayStation Network connection issues for round 1 of the championship. Now, this will all hopefully resolve in the next couple of weeks in the run up towards December 6th for the GT4 wing, which will be 75 minutes, and the GT3 wing on December 13th, that'll be 90 minutes. But today, we're in for 60 minutes of racing here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. We're getting on board now with Pascal Stolz, our pole sitter in the 172 for the first round of 3 here in the special series that is the HCCL Karussell Cup. Now, to highlight some other activities we've got going on, I believe it's December 19th. I'll have to refresh my memory of that. But in the middle of December, we also do have with HCCL the 2.4 hours of Spa, a charity race for St. Jude's Children's Hospital that we'll be doing with them as a charity event. That's a one-off coming up in the middle of next month. But let's get on to the topic at hand here right now on November 29th. The first of 3 rounds here in the Karussell Cup, a real showcase then of the Nürburgring and the many classes therein. And starting things off then, the small but mighty BMW M2 CS Racing Cup cars. Underdogs to no one today. The M2s take centre stage for the first round of 3. GT4s coming up after them, and then GT3s after them. Let's see then what the little M2s can do. 6 cylinders, 365 horsepower, the smallest and lightest coupe that BMW can sell you off of the showroom floor. And let's see what all of them can do when they're hollowed out, given a whole heap of racing gear and handed over to some of the finest talents in HCCL. Well, they're not far from the line. We're still on board with Pascal Stolz. This is the big one then on the run in towards the infamous Green Hell for the first of 3 times here in the Karussell Cup on our way out of Tiergarten. 11 cars in all, 5 on one side, 6 on the other. Down towards the line we go from Stolz and Copsey for that front row. Without further ado then, for the first round of the HCCL Karussell Cup, taking us down towards the line, we're green and racing here in the Green Hell. A very abrupt start there, very early to the timing lines. We can see already having fallen in behind Matthew Copsey on a lightning start. Pascal Stolz finds himself immediately forced to defend for second place. Could even be for the last of those podium positions as he moves out wide there to the left-hand side to try and run around the outside. Then to the inside on Copsey, fumbles in his efforts to do so. In the background, you can see James Mason and Asahi Ota swamp Mr. Scallops for the podium position, and moreover for the top 4 positions. Those two still side by side on their way down towards the RTL into the forward curves here in the GP section, side by side between the 413 and the number 54. Asahi Ota back to the inside here on James Mason. 2 Titans collide here on their way through the forward curves, still side by side. So this was really what we were expecting to see out of the M2s. They're so close to one another and barely into the track so far, barely a minute into the race, and we still have very engaging action out of these two. The 413 and the 54 still side by side, and this is all in control for that third place. And they're finally getting the better of 2 exits before we hit the Schumacher S's. James Mason up to third, Asahi Ota fourth, and Mr. Scallops round out that top 5, but he's not too far away at all. You can see having carved his way up the road is Tom Wells. And we do have trouble. It's for the 28. It's Raphael Bayer at the Schumacher S's. We saw a car get flung absolutely wayward. We did not think it would be Bayer down towards the wall. So very early doors trouble there for both Rafael Bayer and also for Pascal Stolz. He started from a resounding pole position, but was left with this sort of trousers down there, caught out by Matthew Copsey. I've never seen a start that invigorated by Copsey. He was off the line. That was a real old-fashioned Western gun draw between those two. And the fastest hand in the West right now is the 97. In the background then, that fight for the podium continues to rage on, but I want to draw attention here to a fight going on just behind them. This is at the back of the top 5, and this is between Mr. Scallops, Tom Wells, and Thomas Ferre. The 394, the 12, and the 84 looking to go head-to-head here for the last of those top 5 positions. For Mr. Scallops, he currently remains in 5th place. Up the road, James Mason and Asahi Ota still scrapping for the last of those podium positions. Well, what a start then we've seen here in the Nürburgring. You can see a little bit of a spread out towards the back there. Steven Sutton and Anthony Valorio having broken away from this fight right now. Making our way then down towards Schwedenkreuz. Out through the Flugplatz, I should say. Schwedenkreuz is a bit of a distant memory from where we are. Much more used to a faster vehicle here in the Nürburgring, but as we've seen right now, speed isn't everything. As we see a big plume of dust kicked up in the distance there. Who was that by looks of it? We try and catch on board here. That was for Matthew Copsey, and it allows Asahi Ota and James Mason to carve their way back up onto the podium positions. Moreover, it gives Pascal Stolz free reign of the race. Leads to a slight incident there for Matthew Copsey. Undoes all of the progress he made on that race start, and a real solid start, I must say, as well. One of the best starts I think we've seen out of Copsey in his HCCL career. We've seen him as a more prominent sight in the Porsche lineup back in GT4 Challenge, but in M2s, he's really had this one on up until now. You see here, though, with Asahi Ota, he's up onto the podium and still charging forth towards James Mason as we make our way into Adnar Forst. Not too far up the road there, you can see the white, green, and red of that number 172. Pascal Stolz leads in the Nürburgring here at round 1 of the Karussell Cup. And the exit of Adnar Forst still very close. 56 minutes, of course, and that mandatory pit stop they're in, so strategy to come in later on in today's race, about 26 minutes before we could realistically expect to see any kind of talks of a pit lane run. I think the drivers, especially on a little bit of unfamiliar territory with these M2s, are going to be gunning towards that 50-50. Now, that's really just a prediction on our end. We can, of course, not govern what the drivers choose to do, nor is there a fixed pit window for this championship as far as we've been led on to believe. So it is still open reign for these drivers to choose to do as they wish. We see here, though, we're on board with Asahi Ota, and he is looking to get quite firmly into a fight now as we stay on board with the 54. James Mason right in sight here for 2nd place. Further behind them, you can see gaining. Matthew Copsey looking to make this 3 cars in all for that fight of 2nd place. In the background, Mr. Scallops still trying to shake loose of the 84 of Thomas Ferre and Tom Wells in the background as they make their way currently down towards Exmuller. It's very close indeed between these 3. Looking at it here, James Mason still leading the charge in that fight for 2nd place. Meanwhile, about 1.5 seconds up the road from Mason's point of view is Pascal Stolz on our way towards Bergwerk. Now, bear in mind, these cars have been a little bit accident prone, and I think this has been a bit of a culture shock for a lot of these drivers. Of course, as we mentioned earlier in the stream, most of them are more used to, at least when in the talks of slower machines on ACC, they're much more used to GT4s that can definitely take a degree more punishment than the M2s. These are a little bit flakier over the curbs, and this is really not the kind of news you want to hear with a track like the Nordschleife, where when the opportunity does present itself, you will have to abuse those curbs at some point. Now, not all of them are built the same. Of course, you can see a lot of them are quite raised up. Some of them are flat. Some of them are literally just brick and concrete. Brick and mortar, I should say. On their way down through Mudkurve. But on a track as large as this, you've got to take every opportunity you can get. So to have a car that can reflect on that mindset is absolutely paramount for success here. The M2s are just not that car. So the drivers are having to take this a little bit more awkwardly than they would have liked. And we could definitely expect to see a degree more confidence when we get towards GT4 and GT3. Much more familiar grounds for a lot of these drivers, especially here on HCCL, with a lot of these drivers still running on the fresh memory of the GT4 Challenge Series, which wrapped up a few weeks back. See a little bit of a snap there on the exit of the Karussell for Asahi Ota, the first ever run in this race through the Karussell for these drivers. That does shake a few tenths off of the gap between himself and James Mason, and it is starting to shift the priority away from a fight of second, moreover for a defensive fight of third place. You can see in the background there, Matthew Copsey, who started from the front row, has dropped back a few after an incident down towards the run into Flugplatz, and then on the exit towards Kottenborn-Schwedenkreuz, where he dropped 3 positions from the race lead. Out through Hedvigshohe. Now, this could flip on a moment's notice here. These 3 almost in direct, perfect stalemate. It was about 0.5 of a second just before the run in through Wippermann. In towards Eschbach, we go in towards Brünchen. In through Brünchen now. In towards the Pflanzgartens and Sprunghügel. This is going to be a very interesting spot to watch when we stay on board once again with Asahi Ota. You can see in that rear view mirror is the green number 97 of Matthew Copsey. Up in front of him right now is James Mason. This has now shifted back into that fight for second place. Into Pflanzgarten 1 we go towards Sprunghügel. You see up the road there, now disappearing quite quickly off of screen, is Pascal Stolz, having retaken the race lead. Big compression there for the 54, and it does allow a little bit of an advance there out in the 97, now 0.2 of a second away. So shifting it back again away from the fight of second towards the fight of third over another crest here where it's super easy for that front end to go light and the car to understeer. Asahi Ota clinging to the margins here. As you can see, having a slightly better run of things is Matthew Copsey in that 97. So in that fight for third right now, it's the 54 and the 97. A touch of grass there for Asahi Ota, and that gives easy access for Matthew Copsey to swing up into third place. One tiny mistake on these M2s and it can be absolutely vital for one's control of position. The 172 continues to lead right now. James Mason now carving his way further up the road for second place. We've seen the most recent move out of Matthew Copsey over Asahi Ota, but this is where it could definitely swing back. We've seen a lot of smoke there coming out of Galgenkopf. That was for the 172, the leading BMW of Pascal Stolz. We're still on board though with Asahi Ota back into that fight for third. So the fighting spirit has not yet left the 54. He may have been down a position from the podium, but now you can see that slipstream is just so vital in these single make cup cars that it's going to effectively allow him to just stroll on by on the 97. Bear in mind though, Matthew Copsey is not going to be making this one exactly easy. It's not a cakewalk here. Out through Antonio Spucker, he's still around the outside and will be to the inside on the run down towards Tiergarten. So he still has a look for the inside here, Copsey, and ultimately what will look like an easy position for Asahi Ota is one much harder fought. We've just seen an incident there. It's the 172. It's Pascal Stolz in trouble. The yellow flag's out for that final sector. The race lead after one lap has collided with the wall. Let's get on board with the 172. That is Pascal Stolz on a disastrous early doors end to his lead of round 1. Could that be to the pit lanes here for the 172? It does look like catastrophic damage for Pascal Stolz. Currently now down to 10th place. You can see the scope of the damage there on the nose of that M2. It's not looking particularly grand here. I don't even think he can get the car steered towards the pit lane. You can see he's trying absolutely everything to keep it from being retired permanently. You can see the car being steered all the way to the left just to try and keep it running straight. That suspension and steering is just all compromised for the 172. That is absolutely disastrous for him. We'll have to catch up with the status of the 172 in due course, but what it has done is reshape the look of the podium with James Mason now leading here in the Nürburgring with Matthew Copsey second, Asahi Ota in a very close third. It puts Mr. Scallops up to fourth, and it does really send quite the shockwave down the grid right now with Stolz now down to 11th place. Casey Miles now up into the top 10. Looking at where we stand then after 10 minutes on the first laps here at the Nordschleife here in the Karussell Cup. James Mason leads Matthew Copsey second, Asahi Ota in third, Mr. Scallops fourth. Thomas Ferre rounds out the top 5. Tom Wells up to 6th with Stephen Sutton in 7th. Anthony Valorio in 8th place. Rafael Bayer in 9th and Casey Miles in 10th. The most recent then has been the troubles for the 172. Still unable to get to the pit lane. He does not want to call it quits here, but I really do think in his current condition that M2 cannot keep going, and you can see there toads to the pit lane goes the 172. 48 minutes then left to go in this race, and in the opening quarter hour, it has been disaster for Pascal Stolz off of what has been a lightning offensive in qualifying. Looking here, though, with our race leader, the newly crowned race leader, I should say, James Mason, on his way in towards the Nordschleife section now, in towards Hatzenbeck. He's closely trailed by Kopsy and Ota. A three-way split on the podium here for that race lead. This could be quite an exciting one to watch. Let's stay on board with the leading of three. James Mason currently in the fight for the race lead. Looking over his rear view then, and we make our way in through towards Hoornijken. One of the first of our sort of faster sections of the track here. All of the drivers sort of twitching, jittering behind him there, struggling to find pace on these M2s. There's a lot more of an involving experience compared to the more aero-intensive design of GT4 and GT3 by comparison. Of course, it's all still quite mechanically driven in terms of grip for those two subcategories, but compared to the M2s, I mean, it's a bit of a tough call. Out through the Flugplatz there, in towards Cottonborn, you can see that Mason just got a little bit more of a calm demeanor in this opening section here, and it has rewarded him by giving him about half a second of clearance over Kopsy. Nearly 0.6 of a second. We make our way down towards Schwedenkreuz and Arenberg. Now, this is where things can go wrong. They're a little bit flaky under brakes at the moment, and especially in a curved braking zone where just as you stop turning the wheels in on the exit of Schwedenkreuz and Arenberg, is when you have to start getting onto the brakes. Now in through Fuchsrohr, Mason leads half a second clear at the moment of Kopsy. Ota right behind him as well. We'll be back in just a moment's time. We'll leave you on board with these three. So still on board with Mason, Kopsy and Ota. They make their way currently in towards Kallenhard, and Weerseifen coming up not too far from now. And despite the smaller grid than we were expecting to see over the course of today's race, massive slide there, I should point out as well, out through Weerseifen for James Mason. Despite the smaller grid, we are not starved for good battles here in the Green Hell as we make our way currently down through Weerseifen now. Sorry, so that was on the exit of Kallenhard, I should point out. That slide by Mason. Got a little bit ahead of ourselves here. Now through Weerseifen and down towards Exmüller. These three still absolutely glued to one another right now. And it can go any which way, but we'll have to cut away from them as yellow flags are out, and it's for Steven Sutton in trouble at the moment. We can see here, this is through Exmüller. He was turned around, and it seems there could be the culprit, Raphael Bayer, with damage on his nose, matching the description here of what could be a turnaround incident for Steven Sutton. Now, we're not going to go pointing fingers because we've not seen the incident, but if it were to have been a case where two drivers have come together, that could be your likely two. But for Sutton, it could have just been a case where he spun around, but you can see it's significant damage on the nose where he has collided with the wall out through Exmüller. Right now, he's back up into the race. 9th place right now, and I think as far as we've been led to believe right now, we have got confirmation of a DNF on our hands here, as now the announcement has come through. Pascal Stoltz is out of round 1 of the Karussell Cup. He has been forced to retire the car after catastrophic damages. We're now on board with Matthew Kopsy, who has made a real offensive towards the race lead right now, making our way in towards Steilstrecke on the run towards the Karussell Carousel. Kopsy still in pursuit with Ota not too far behind. You can see though on the run towards Steilstrecke, it was very, very close indeed between the 97 and the 413. Let's stay on board now. The man in the middle could be split between a fight of first or a fight of his own position for second place, as Matthew Kopsy has got his hands full here just after the first quarter hour of racing here in round 1 of the Carousel Cup. The vehement pursuit then of that 413. James Mason just up the road from him as we make our way in through towards Hohe Acht. See the amount of corrections Copsy's having to do to keep that car in line. All of his reflexes there have been sort of tuned and honed under the veil of Grand Prix racing. So it's actually coming quite nicely and handy for him here. Out through Hedvigshoy in towards Vipperman. Through to Brunchen. Bear in mind, it was one mistake that took the race lead away already for Pascal Stoltz. Let's not say that it isn't possible for the same to happen for James Mason. I'm sure he's, of course, feeling on the contrary. He does not want anything like that to happen. He doesn't want to jinx it too early, and he's probably not going to be particularly happy with us saying anything along the lines here. But in the case for Matthew Copsey, he is praying for that incident. Out through Sprunghoek we go towards Flansgarten 2. 97 still in pursuit. Bear in mind, not far off his trail right now in third place is the 54. Having dropped to just about a second here. Bear in mind, as we've seen, one mistake, one slip is all that it takes to bring these cars back in line. And right now, they start to spread out towards the run into the Dottinger Hohe. Now, this is exactly what Copsey needs right now, is to stay in the slipstream range of Mason and to cut Ota away from his own slipstream. This is what's going to give him the best possible run for the race lead. So out through the Schwalbenschwanz towards the Kleiner Karussell. Now, we've seen him flake out at this section. Let's hope that he doesn't make the same mistake again. It's very clean between all three of them on the way down towards Galgenkopf. This could be a move for the race lead out of Matthew Copsey. The two British drivers up front here, James Mason and Matthew Copsey, head-to-head as they make their way through Galgenkopf. This is going to be Slipstream City on the run down through the Dottinger Hohe. On with the 97. You can see, having just cut far enough away from Asahi Ota to where he's not going to see anywhere near the degree of an advantage that he sees right now. Right caught up in the slipstream of the 413, slowly reeling him in. He's got Mason on the line, trying to cut loose of him there, cutting off any amount of tow he can possibly give to Matthew Copsey, but it seems all but inevitable that the 97 is creeping up at a rate of knots here. Making our way to Antonios Booker, looking for the inside. Mason's leaving it open for him because he knows what's coming up next. Making our way through Antonios Booker side by side between the 97 and the 413. Matthew Copsey and James Mason side by side, but forced to cut across, and it could be into the wall as he has to slow down very, very quickly here. Somehow, amidst it all, James Mason stays in the lead. Copsey won't be particularly happy with it, and this is his opportunity to make back on that, as now holding the inside on the pit straight. James Mason defending down towards the Yokohama S's. Now, Copsey can play this one very close to the chest here because he can take the lead in the side draft, knowing that Mason will be to the inside on the first part of turn 1, but he'll be to the inside for the second part as it's a shorter chicane than what we see in the normal GP Strecker. This is the point in play, as he's on the outside for the first part of it. Oh, it's contact between Mason and Ota. I don't think anyone saw that one coming from left field, heading in through the Yokohama S's. That has given Copsey the lead of this race. It has definitely put a bit of a sore mark there for the 413 and moreover for the 54 as well. Caught up in it all on a different line for Asahi Ota. Ended up careening towards the back end of a switching Mason. Now that puts Matthew Copsey firmly into the race lead. So it has been quite an enthralling experience so far. The 41 of Anthony Valorio and the number 7 of Stephen Sutton are into the pit lanes. So it may not have been so clear-cut. We did not scope in the damage for Valorio. Now, bear in mind, Valorio and Sutton were closer to each other than Sutton was to Bayer, I believe, at the time. So I think it was a bit wrong of us to potentially point that in the direction, but you can see where our argument would have come from. The sizable nose damage there on Rafael Bayer's number 28. Now, we'll let race control deal with the brass tacks of that all. What we see right now, having slipped his way into this fight, if my memory is not deceiving me here, that is Thomas Ferre. As right now, Mr. Scallops moves up to second place. It puts, at this time right now, looking at it here for James Mason, it puts him down to third place with Thomas Ferre fourth and Asahi Ota in fifth. So let's get a look on board with this, because James Mason has not lost his fighting spirit whatsoever down towards the Vidal chicane. Now finds himself with a new ensemble of challengers. Mr. Scallops 3 seconds up the road from him, and Thomas Ferre challenging for the podium here on our way into the Nordschleife. Let's see if we can stay on board, though, with a man in the middle. We always like to get that middle perspective here. On board now with Thomas Ferre. currently in that fight for third. He's up against both Asahi Ota and James Mason, but he is gunning ultimately for third place. The Frenchman on his first race here in the Karussell Cup, moreover, the first time on our screens here on TRTN, has already made a very solid first impression with fairly competitive times over the course of qualifying today, albeit a very bizarre quali to kick things off. But for Ferre right now, he's took the baton and ran with it, as now, amidst the incident between Mason and Ota, he's slid right between the pair of them here, inside of that top 5 and potentially within a chance, if one more mistake does arise in the direction of the 413, to gun for third place. Right now, he's going to have to redouble his efforts to defend for fourth as Mason starts to escape here on our way up towards the Flugplatz. Then from behind him, you can see advancing is Asahi Ota in 5th place. In towards Flugplatz, you can see that the aero wash is catching up a little bit there to Asahi Ota. Now, with these M2s, they have got the upside of a little bit more mechanical grip bias over the standard aero grip. That's not to say that the aerodynamics aren't doing anything. Believe me, they are. It is going to have an effect on the drivers when they continue to stick around each other for longer. I think where it's going to matter a lot more for them is that excess heat. They stick around much longer in the dirty air of another driver. That engine's going to start getting hot. Everything's going to start getting a little bit hotter, and they're going to see overall less grip. The tires are going to struggle more to generate grip in the wash, and that's ultimately going to heat them up. That is not what they need with a mechanically driven car for that handling, I should say. They're a lot more mechanical grip for the M2s. You see, though, one little slip up out through Polstrasse for James Mason has now forced everything back into alignment for the fight of third place, heading towards Adnar, forced very late on the brakes by Mason to try and stave off any early doors offensive here by the 84 of Thomas Ferre. Meanwhile, right behind him, the 54 of Asahi Ota, so they're not going actually anywhere at this time. They're effectively a road train here on the exit of the Adnar Forst. Meanwhile, Mr. Scallop's still 3.8 seconds up the road from Ferre. That's 3.6 seconds at this time from Mason. So making our way down towards the run into Kallenhardt and Metzgerfeld. Now down towards Kallenhardt. You can see they're indicated on the sign. Here we go. And he can take a look for the inside, but he's just too far away to try it at this time. Hoping now that it's one more mistake that gives him an extra position on the charts here. Heading down towards Veerseifen. This was an area of the track just before Veerseifen that we saw a pretty decent slide out of the 413, a bit of Tokyo drifting from James Mason. Heading down towards Veerseifen now, this very sharp hairpin left. It's where all of our drivers bunch up. A little bump over the curbs there knocks Asahi Ota off of the pedestal, puts him about 0.8 seconds now, up toward a whole second away from Thomas Ferre, and leaves him lasered in at this time on the 413 of James Mason on our way down towards, looking at it here, down through the Asphalt Breitscheid on the exit of Exmüller. Heading towards Bergwerk then. Another overtaking opportunity coming up, but he's got to be a lot closer than he is right now, and the slipstream alone is just not doing enough for Thomas Ferre. So to bear this in mind, 35 minutes left to go in this race, and we are functionally looking at that halfway mark not too far from now. This would be the dead-on halfway mark coming up for our drivers to have that run of the pits. Two cars already having gone through the pit lane, both of the drivers who started on that fourth row in today's race, that being that of Anthony Valorio and Stephen Sutton. Much so with Thomas Ferre, he has stayed very, very close to James Mason. And this is definitely a bizarre performance we've seen. Mason has definitely had the chances to lead in this race. He is actually for a moment led here in the Nordschleife in round one of the Karussell Cup. It's all come asunder after that incident between himself and Asahi Ota. For now, though, Mason's just hoping for the chances to be on the podium. Strategy may be where he plays his heaviest hand here, with Scallops and Copsey further up the road from them than they are to each other. It is really a battle towards the back of that top five, and we see with big step outs for both Mason and Ferre, the driver who gains the most from that, At this time, Asahi Ota now making his way back in as we head towards the Hohe Acht. Meanwhile, up the road, I want to point this out. We're going to get on board. We see, oh, it's trouble for Mason. That leaves Ferre to go up the inside just before we cut away. Mason into the wall, practically chastaining his way around the metal barriers. He's in at the wall. Ferre's up to third. Ota's to fourth. Mason to fifth. But this is where I wanted to point things out, is in that fight for the race lead. Mr. Scallops is closing in on Matthew Copsey. Sliding his way in towards the run of Bunchen. This could get dicey here with a 394 looking on very solid form after breaking away from the top 5 fight. He now puts himself firmly in the middle of that podium and with chances right now on floundering pace of the 97 to put himself on the race leading position. Now, strategy is still going to play a very heavy hand despite the smaller grid. We saw how things drastically changed at the end of the GT4 challenge, even when there were strategies to consider to quickly take this into mind in the background. James Mason is back into that fight, heading out through Sprunghögel to Flansgarten 2. He's back into the fight from 5th place, now behind Asahi Ota, but could stand to benefit the most of these three. With Thomas Ferre in a vulnerable position, he is desperately trying to shake away Asahi Ota from being on his slipstream when we head on to the Dottinger Höhe. In through Flansgarten 2, a little bit of an unorthodox run there by Mason, but you can see he's eyeing up either side of Asahi Ota, trying to see, well, what's going on up the road ahead of him, what's going on around that 54, and how can I best navigate him. In through Schwalbenschwanz, we see another yellow flag. It's for the 41 of Anthony Valorio in trouble. Let's see if we can catch on board with him here as we just briefly scan through the field. And there you can see the scope of the damage. This is just on his way out of Mudkurve. Serious nose damage for the 41 before he's gotten towards Stahlstrecke and Klostertal. That could be a very, very dicey run to the pit lane for him. But let's get on board with our three here. Asahi Ota, Thomas Ferre and James Mason, who have become the real talk of the paddock here in round one. We see Asahi Ota gunning for 3rd place. He's looking to get back up onto the podium. We stay on board with him. He's side by side with Thomas Ferre on the run down the Dottinger, but now this is where everything becomes a little bit dicey on the run towards Antoniusbucher and Tiergarten. We've already seen so many drivers run into trouble in these final set of corners. So heading up flat out here, north of 260 kilometers an hour, making our way through Antoniusbucher. Here comes Asahi Ota to 3rd place. So he's got that one tucked in. But what is the fight back here by Ferre? Moreover, can he get down onto the brakes in time to size up a good run through Tiergarten? Yes, that does appear to be the case. Not making the same mistakes here. Asahi Ota now up into 3rd. But what is the call for coming into the pit lane? See, for Ota, he was considering his options, but looking behind him, going into the pit lane, both in all there, looked to be that of... just taking one quick look here, that was both Ferre and Mason, and I believe, looking at it, they were racing each other to the pits. Mason is out, though. I did see that looked to have been a potential collision between the pair of them on their way in. James Mason, sadly, out of this race. Thomas Ferre into the pit lane. So too is Matthew Copsey and also Raphael Bayer and Tom Wells. So it's definitely been a bit of a controversial opening round. I think for a lot of drivers, they've took to heart the idea that this is effectively now a drop round because of those persistent issues with PSN. But I think it's definitely got a lot more elbows out than I think a lot of people would want in today's race. It now brings the grid size only down to a titular 9-car field. Anthony Valorio, we see here, making his way down towards Flansgarten. Looking at here, Flansgarten 1, and then he's got the Sprunghögel coming up here. But you can see it is such a sketchy run from right now. He's got damage to the nose, he's got damage to the steering, he's having to keep the wheel almost 90 degrees to the left to keep the car running straight. Now out through Sprunghögel towards the Flansgarten 2 section. He has got a long, long way to that checkered flag, and he's just about heading into halfway into the session. Bayer still in the pit lane. We see Ferre leaving. Wells not far from following him as well. Matthew Copsey's on his way out of the pit lane already, and 3rd in this race. And that does leave a very lonesome front row there with Mr. Scallops out on his out by his lonesome, I should say. The 394 in the lead of this race, but only 7 seconds clear of Asahi Ota. And I should say that as it drops now to 6.5 seconds between the pair as we enter the Vidal chicane. And it's a big slide for Asahi Ota. Oh, it's going to get sketchy. He's into the wall. What has gone on there? For the 54, he's knocked against the wall. Let's get a look at that on the replays because I'm a little confused as to how that's gone on for him. You see here, this was on the exit of the Vidal. trying to get onto the brakes, and it just seems like the car goes completely straight. There's no grip over the nose. Ultimately, tank slaps it there. That was his rear right colliding with the wall. We don't know exactly what the scope of the damage is looking like for Asahi Oto after that collision, but it didn't look nice. You know, the pits at the moment as well comes Casey Miles, the number 96 in, with 28 minutes left to go. So we have seen the bulk of our pit stops come at that 30-minute mark as predicted. I think a lot of drivers are just choosing to play things safe today, given the very unorthodox scope of things, I would say is the best word for it. These are cars not many people have a lot of experience in, on a track that you really would like to have experience with the car on, in conditions that have already waylaid well over half the grid from being able to compete today, as because of the PSN outages. To give some light on the situation for our broadcast weekend here on TRTN, we do know that there is a bit more of an immediate response that has come out of NLRL. Last night they cancelled the upcoming scheduled round for the Console Endurance Series, the 6 Hours of Silverstone, which is now set to be rescheduled to the next available slot on the calendar. There'll be more information about that coming out, hopefully in the next couple of days. And if these issues are to persist, this was an unofficial statement given to us by Race Control. We're just relaying, I should say, the words they have told us. And that is the case that if these issues persist to midnight tonight on the 29th of November into the 30th of November, it will be a case that the Sunday League round scheduled to happen tomorrow will also be delayed / cancelled. It will be moved to the next slot on the calendar, being the next Sunday after. In terms of the Console Endurance Series, that's already been underway. The 6 Hours of Silverstone that some of you may be expecting to happen today is not going ahead as of right now, but it will be moved to when round 5 slot on the calendar will be, and the whole series will finish about 2 to 3 weeks later than scheduled. So it should be in and around, remembering from memory, it's still Q1 2026. So there is not too much lost on that. With a lot of drivers competing from PSN, it's been a case where a lot of our clients have been quite proactive in their responses. I'm still quite glad that we managed to get a race out today, this time out of the Karussell Cups. And the compromise met by HCCL is that this is a drop round. So for the GT3s and GT4s, do expect a little bit more championship consideration with any hopes. And for a lot of drivers, especially as we've seen there for Stoltz and Mason, they'll be quite fortunate that this is a drop round for them, as it will not contribute to their standings in a Karussell Cup Drivers' Championship. So still curious as to where he could find himself after all things said and done. 26.5 minutes separates Matthew Copsey from the checkered flag, and with 2 drivers in front of him, both of which yet have to take their pit stops, this could be payday for Copsey. He's got open road ahead of him here as he makes his way in towards the run at Carlenhard into the forest section. Got a nice clean open road. Meanwhile, the drivers up in front of him, Mr. Scallops and Asahi Oto, are now starting to battle mentally with one another here over trying to keep distance. That has now since expanded out in favor of the 394 to about 8.5 seconds at this time. But Mr. Scallops still leading the charge after what has been a very divisive opening round of the Karussell Cup. I must say, it has been a very bizarre concoction to have the M2s race here at the Nürburgring for an hour-long sprint race, but it has definitely produced a very bizarre result therein. And bear in mind, still 25.5 minutes before that checkered flag, so anything can and has already been proven to happen today. Looking around the field then for where our nearest fights could be coming from, we do find ourselves under strategy as of right now, separate by quite some way. And this is sort of a routine thing at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. It's why the N24 layout is almost exclusively used on the auspice of a longer form endurance race, namely the N24. Because it is a track that lends itself to the strategic hand here. Drivers do end up being separated by what is over minutes as opposed to seconds at the checkered flag on most of these races. So for the GTs, the GT4s and GT3s, we could definitely see them get closer, but for the M2s, this is where we really get that law of extreme. For a lot of drivers, it does make a lot more sense as to why they are separate from the rest of the field. Stephen Sutton had some incidents earlier on today and had to repair nose damage. It's why he's separate from Tom Wells by just under a minute, and why he's distant from Casey Miles by a little over a minute. And that's the same story that's befell Anthony Valorio down in 9th place. That's why he's about 3 minutes as it stands right now off of Stephen Sutton on our screens at the moment. As for the drivers up in the top 5, it has been a strategic call that's given them the gap. So for Copsey over Ferre, where the both of them were very close to one another for the longest time. Moreover as well with Ferre and Ota. Ota is still yet to come into the pit lane, so his primary target right now is to be ahead of Thomas Ferre by the time he exits the pit lane. So he's got 53 seconds right now over Asahi Ota. If we were to take a look from Ferre's point of view, that's about 1 minute and 12 seconds he's got over the 84. And speaking of, here is Asahi Ota, who's 8.5 seconds from Mr. Scallops in the race lead. So let's stay on board with the race leader here as we make our way down the run through, looking at it here, out through Wippermann towards Eschbach and Brunchen. That's actually now on Franzgarten 1 in towards the Sprunghügel. Now, you might be confused why we keep messing up all the corners. It is literally because they tilt the track here on ACC by looking at it here about 90 degrees to the left. I have a track map that is not that, so I am just completely lost trying to piece together. And bear in mind, it's 170 corners. It is a lot to process information-wise. Out through Franzgarten 2 towards the Schwalbenstrand. Here's Mr. Scallops in the 394. The 54 now 8.5 seconds away and growing is that gap between himself and the 54 at this time. So it's quite clear control after all things said and done. When the dust has settled, Mr. Scallops has got very firm control at the wheel here of this race. But with 64 seconds there, just over a minute between himself and Matthew Copsey, the nearest of the already having ran to the pit drivers, it does leave him in a vulnerable spot. Because for even the smaller tracks, we've seen that to run in and take about a 25-second repair job, including, you know, tires and fuel, including a pit lane run, even on the shorter tracks, can constitute 57 seconds. I think we saw those were the calculations given to us. This was back when we were covering round 4 of the XCL Pro Series at Watkins Glen in Schuyler County, New York State. And that was the data we were given, and that's a very short track. The pit lane here is a tad longer, if I'm not mistaken, than what we have out of Watkins Glen, so do expect that gap to have been nullified. Mr. Scallops could be hanging on to a thread here for the lead of this race as we make our way in towards Tiergarten. And we'll stay on board with him, though, to see what is the current call for the entrance to the pit lane. See, he's angling his way in, so yes, he is looking for a run into the pits. And I must say as well, something I am quite surprised by is we've not seen any penalties today. I think we've definitely come off quite lucky in the face of things here, with the 54 coming up very quickly. I believe following him in the background there, you can see the very faint golden glow of the 54. That's Asahi Ota making his way into the pit lane. So our front runners are in. This does leave the positions potentially open for grabs by the 97, currently heading towards the halfway mark of the Dottinger Hohe. Here's Matthew Copsey standing upon the chances to lead in this race once more. Let's stay on board with the 97. This is a very long-winded fight for first place. He could be more realistically for second. We'll see exactly how it pans out for Copsey. Of course, he's gunning for gold here, making his way down towards Tiergarten. That is a gap dropping away rather dramatically here, with Mr. Scallops still yet to have been cleared off of his jacks. I think it could be a case that he'll be following him all the way down to the line here. Mr. Scallops does stand to lose the race lead over Matthew Copsey. Heading towards the line we go then. The 97, over strategy, manages to achieve on the undercut as we see Scallops is just cleared off of his jacks, racing him to the line down towards turn 1. Matthew Copsey now back up into the race lead. And only off, by looking at it there, about 2.5, maybe about 3 seconds between himself and Mr. Scallops as we make our way through the Yokohama S's. That was a very, very close job between the pair of them. As we see Asahi Ota re-enters the field in third place. Thomas Ferre just having crossed the line 10 seconds off of the 54. Ota still on the podium. Scallops, the man now in the middle of it all. 2.9 seconds, just a shy tad there off of 3 seconds from Matthew Copsey in the race lead. This could be quite a dicey one here. 20 minutes left to go. Functionally looking at about 2, potentially 3 more laps here in the Nordschleife. I would say we're definitely looking at 2 on the safer side of things. Now, with only 3 seconds dividing the race win here in round 1 in the M2 Cup division, is still on board with Mr. Scallops, this time on the exit of Warsteiner. Heading in towards the Hatzenbechtsbogen in the GP section, heading down towards Vidal in a moment's time. You can see just up the road from him there. That is the physical gap between himself and Matthew Copsey for the race lead, heading in towards Vidal. Into the Nordschleife we go. 19 minutes left to go in this race. We saw incidents earlier on the run into the Nordschleife, namely for Asahi Ota, who's now down in third place, about 7.8 seconds and a far, far distance away from that of Mr. Scallops at this time. So in towards the Hatzenbeck section. Hatzenbach, I should say. You can see it's in this maneuverability intensive section of the track that Scallops just has this very calculated command of the car. I'd say is the best word for it. It's very calm under pressure. You're not seeing him push the car too hard now, knowing that strategy may not have been all the way to his side here, but he can definitely stand to fight things back in the next 2 laps, this being among them right now. We'll be looking at functionally about 6, maybe 7 laps here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife before the end of the first round of the Karussell Cup. It only stands to gain more and more laps, with 75 minutes of racing to follow in round 2 and 90 minutes in race 3. Making our way then down towards Schwedenkreuz. The gap 2.3 seconds, so he's already trimmed 7/10 off of the gap from where it started after his pit lane exit, down towards Arenberg and Polstrasse. Still on with the 394. The 97 now 2.4 seconds. So having gained a 10th there to now 0.6 of a second improved for Mr. Scallops, and in towards the Adnar 4 section as we head through Fuchsrohr. Copsey is slowly gaining back a little bit of the mojo he had at the start of this race. It has definitely been a real roller coaster ride for the 97. With Scallops in pursuit, the pressure is definitely there to perform with 17 minutes on the line. You see here for Thomas Ferre, he's 11.1 seconds almost exactly to both front and back. That's Rafael Bayer behind him, Asahi Ota up in front. On a very lonely drive in amongst the top 5 here. Ferre won't be arguing with where he finds himself right now in this race, knowing what could have been in today's performance, knowing that under strategy possibly could have found his way to third place, but he's definitely put as many feet right in this race for his first performance here in the Karussell Cup. The 84 looking at a top 5 finish, nothing to scoff at whatsoever. 16.5 minutes to the line. Asahi Ota has definitely fought things back here from the brink, now to third place, 7.8 seconds clear right now to Mr. Scallops in second. Let's get a look on board though with that leading driver, Matthew Copsey. He's definitely got a bit of the world's weight on his shoulders here, as he's now among the only left. After his fight with quite a few drivers today, he was caught up in quite a few different spots of action. James Mason and Asahi Ota most notably pressing him for that leading position. Moreover, he had that fight very early on with Pascal Stolz. That was a fantastic little start that he's had today. He's properly been quick with it off the line. Fastest hand in the 97. Quick to the draw. That's definitely rewarded him here. That fast reaction times, a lot of that could definitely be attributed to his time in F1. But for Copsey, it's definitely been a case that it's been the fastest hand has been the one that's winning. A lot of those decisions that he's made have been ones that have been made very quickly, ones that have been given very little room for overlap and consideration. He has been very forward, very direct. And that's sort of the same kind of mentality he carried out with Porsche and his time in the Cayman. So this car surprisingly does fit him a lot more snugly than it does for others, as this is a car that does require a little bit more of a split-second mindset, a little bit more of a do-or-die headspace. And for Copsey, it has rewarded him quite a lot over the course of this race. Right now, it rewards him with the fact that with just 3/4 of an hour of the race covered, as we enter the final 15 minutes, he does lead on what has definitely been a bit of a reduced size for the grid today, as both James Mason and Pascal Stolz are out of round 1. Pascal Stolz, after his first major incident, leading the race down towards Tiergarten. A huge crash though for him after the first lap. For James Mason, he was chased into the pit lane there, still side by side with, if my memory does follow me here, I'm completely blanked for a second there. I believe it was in his efforts to fight with Ota and Ferre. Ultimately, I think it was both him and Ferre chased into the pit lane. Something caused the 413 to speed. Now, I think he is in our Twitch chat, so we could get clarification there as to what exactly went on. But if my sort of skill of deduction could be brought in here, my sort of detective skills, that's what we were looking for. Good lord, I tell you, it is a long week, very long week. If we use a bit of a detective skills to try and figure that out, they would go both barreling into that pit lane at a rate of knots. I could definitely imagine that it's been a case where he's been chased in, and that bumping has forced him to not be able to brake as hard. He gets across the line and is speeding and decides, well, what's the point taking the stop, go 30? I may as well drop out. Yeah, apologies about that. Genuinely losing my ability to speak today. It's been a very bizarre week, to put it bluntly. And this most recently, the confounded issues with PSN has caused not only the removal of the 6 hours of Silverstone that we were scheduled to cover later on today, it could also affect the Sunday League. And depending on how long this continues, there could be quite the sizable shockwave of events to also be delayed. So it is a bit of a uncertain time here. The only thing certain of it is that the HCCL Karussell Cup was able to go ahead today on a much smaller grid than I'm sure they would have wanted, but a very solid grid, I will say, nonetheless. Right now, observing that gap between Copsey and Scallops. It's 3.1 seconds. They've kept that in very, very close stead. It's a very fine balancing act they've had for the last couple of minutes of racing here. They're still on that same lap. You can't even say last couple of laps anymore here at the Nürburgring. It really does go to show the breadth of this circuit. It is an absolute monster of a venue. See the physical gap as we make our way in towards the considerations of that second from last lap. So looking at it here with 12 minutes left to go, they will have enough in the tank for one more lap after the next one coming. So 2 more laps to follow here. So on the assumption that we are getting 6 laps of racing out of our drivers today here at the Nürburgring, Matthew Copsey still leads now by 3.3 seconds. Following in his trails is Mr. Scallops, looking further around the field than to see what the rest of the grid is concerned with. Asahi Ota third and Thomas Ferre on your screens at the moment. 4th place, Rafael Bayer in 5th with Tom Wells in 6th, Stephen Sutton in 7th, and currently in 8th, Casey Miles rounding out the top 9. We saw for but a moment there is Anthony Valorio in the number 41. Something to bring to your attention as well, just over the course of this last lap just gone, Asahi Ota seemingly is slowly catching up to Mr. Scallops. 6.6 seconds now. That gap has started to wither away between the 394 and the 54. It is getting a lot closer than previous data estimates have given us. The 54 could be, you know, touch on wood, fingers crossed here, could be within that fight of second place by the end of today's race. But there's a lot running on the line for it here. With just over 10 minutes left to go in today's race, we do have, I believe, just enough time for one more lap after this one. So the race will be on its final lap, next lap coming on lap 6. You see here, Casey Miles in 8th place, but what looks to be nose damage as well for the 96. And a little bit of electronics damage there. We saw that the headlights are also flickering. Fortunately, not a night race and not a huge consideration at this time. We also see nose damage for Rafael Bayer. Now, this was for much earlier on in this race. He's held on to that for quite some time. In that 28, he makes his way down towards, looking at it here, down at the Dunlop curve. In towards the Schumacher S as we go. something to note is a potential fight coming up not far from now. 1.8, just a little shy of 2 seconds is the gap right now for the battle of 5th place. That's to happen between Rafael Bayer on our screens but a moment ago, and now on your screens is Tom Wells, the second of 2 combatants in this fight for the back of the top 5. That could be one to watch, and we'll be keeping an eye on that as the race comes to a close not far from today. Not far from right now today, I should say. Something to point out as well, Copsey to Scallops now, a gap of 4.5 seconds. So it is advancing for Copsey. He is gaining time away from the 394. That was hovering around 3 seconds. He's now put a 1.5 seconds on top of that, above all things. Now on his way out towards the Hoheneichen, in towards the Kittelbacher Hohe. In towards Flugplatz we go. The 97 leading this race, looking to kick things off here in the Karussell Cup with a bang. With a race win is nothing to scoff at whatsoever, but he's still got a long walk to that checkered flag. 8.5 minutes left to go. He's still got this lap and the next one coming before he sees the checkered flag here for the first of 3 rounds in the Nürburgring. So to get on board now with that fight for 5th place, just to keep this in the back of our minds here, 8 minutes left to go. Closest fight on track, Rafael Bayer versus Tom Wells. We consider this as well with Tom Wells. Now, we don't know much of Rafael Bayer. This is the first time, like many drivers, that we have seen him on our screens at the moment. The 28 makes his way up towards Flugplatz in pursuit there from behind. You can see the number 12 of Tom Wells. We've seen Tom Wells, though, before here on HCCL, back in the GT4 Challenge, where he was an enigmatic sight with the Ginetta team. After originally signing up to drive for Maserati, he missed out on the first round, where in which he then joined Ginetta with their G55 and became quite a prominent figure for Ginetta in the GT4 Challenge, so much so as to achieve Driver of the Day in the trailing rounds of the championship. But now he finds himself in the pursuit of a top 5 finish for the start of the Karussell Cup, and with issues through Schwedenkreuz, Rafael Bayer is looking vulnerable to Tom Wells here. The number 12 looking for his chances on the exit of the Arenberg section as we're in that fight for 5th place, down towards Fuchsrohr and on the run to the Adnar Forst. This could get dicey between Wells and Bayer. Bayer with nose damage there. The front aero will be creating excessive drag, meaning a little bit more of an unstable performance through the corners for the 28. Heading down through Adnar Forst. Wells still in pursuit here, playing things a little bit more hesitantly, knowing that he can gain a position if he just bides his time and waits. So he's got to be patient and not try too early, especially given the inherently unstable nature of Bayer's number 28. He is having a little bit of trouble keeping that BMW in the clear and narrow. We'll make our way in towards Kallenhardt now, into the forest in that middle section of the Nordschleife. So making our way in towards Veersifen in a moment's time. Having dropped a bit of distance away, though, Bayer has actually found a little bit of stead ahead of Wells, much to the chagrin of the number 12. We also saw, just to briefly pick up on something just before we went away for a moment there, the 96 did have an incident down in the opening sections of the GP section at the start of lap 5. That's for Casey Malles, who momentarily brought out the yellow flags. That has now since cleared. To give an update on that fight for the podium, it is now tilted massively away from a fight of first for the 394 of Mr. Scallops. It is now looking more likely in the next lap coming that he could find himself with both barrels of Asahi Ota's number 54 BMW chasing him down for 2nd place. So that is the most recent updates, but nothing is yet into a full swing fight. This is the closest we have of any 2 cars on track at this time. 5.5 minutes left to go here in round 1, and what has definitely been a precarious start to this exciting and unique championship at hand, this mini series to take us all the way to the end of 2025 before the multi-class championship season 3 kicks off in 2026 here on HCCL. We find ourselves still looking at fighting for the BMWs. Now into a faster section of the track here, in towards Kesselchen, in pursuit. Tom Wells looking for a way around Rafael Bayer, but you can see the number 28 is holding centre mass of the road whenever Wells attempts to make his way left or right of him. Heading down towards Mutzkurve and Klostertal. This is where he could find a bit of a do-or-die opportunity heading in towards Stahlstrecke on the exit of Klostertal coming up right now. This right-hand kink. He's just backing out of it. I think we're starting to get inside the head here of Tom Wells, start to piece together what exactly is his plan right now. And if it is a case where he can't gain position around Rafael Bayer, which is definitely not going to be likely in the next couple of corners after that incident there at Stahlstrecke. Fortunately, only a bit of a, not really even a quarter spin, it was more of an eighth spin, not just a big snap of oversteer if you really want to get into the semantics of it all. On the exit of Karussell, he has lost some time away from Bayer. So Wells will be able to slowly reel Bayer back in, but I think where he's trying to catch him now, best opportunity in-house is on the Dottinger. He's got excessive drag from that nose cone damage. His best chances to secure a move around Bayer if he does not make a mistake here in the third sector is going to be on that run down at the Dottinger. LeBay asking, where is Mason? Sadly, Mason has retired from this race. It was an incident involving himself and another driver in the pit lane. And with a little bit of detective skills, we could piece together that he was potentially collided with on a very excitable run into that pit lane and ultimately ended up speeding. And he retired himself to the pit lane, leaving the race. Now, that's not 100% what's happened. This is literally just a speculation on our end. But brass tacks of it is that James Mason is one of two DNFs in today's race, the other being Pascal Stoltz. We saw the reason very clearly was critical vehicle damage, the first of its kind really, where we have seen a car so inoperable that it's not been a case where by volition they've been forced to that they've chosen to retire the car by volition. It is more a case that the very laws of physics itself have forced the car to retire. In through Sprunghugel, we're on board with Tom Wells, still pursuing in towards Flansgarten 2. On our way. Now, just briefly cutting away here from that fight towards the back of the top 5, just to take a look inside the podium here with Mr. Scallops, you can see has bled a lot of time away from Copsey, but has namely lost a lot of ground between himself and Asahi Ota. So as they look down the sights here of one more lap before the end of round 1 of the Karussell Cup, Asahi Ota stands upon the possibility to move to second place. Getting back on board here with Rafael Bayer, the number 28. Oh, as we catch on board with him there, takes one toke of grass with him just before the run to Galgenkopf and takes a full half spin, I should say. You can see here, just as we caught on board with Rafael Bayer, this is on the exit of the Kleiner Karussell in towards Galgenkopf, touches a tiny little toke of grass there on the left-hand side on the exit of, well, actually on the starting part of Galgenkopf, and then spins the car in. That is going to give a more than comfortable position up towards Tom Wells. Rafael Bayer will be beside himself here as we enter that final run of laps here. We also see into the pit lanes is Casey Miles in the number 96 car. Now, we don't know in the meantime what was the surrounding circumstances to bring Miles back to the pit lane, but as you can see here, it has been seemingly by choice. Normally when a driver does bring the car in manually to the pit lane, it does clean a lot of the damage off of the car and all of the grit and dirt therein. I think this was potentially by choice. Now, we don't know 100% because we were focused on the incident there for Bayer down at Galgenkopf, but you see into the pits at the moment after quite a few incidents today. Casey Miles back into the pit lane. The number 28 finds even more trouble. This is Rafael Bayer again. First incident was down at Galgenkopf, this one down at Tiergarten. And as you can see, looking at his point of view, I think this is a very similar incident to what we've seen here out of the... Oh boy, out of that was the previous leading car as well, that Pascal Stoltz had the same issue, and it looks like another steering rack is gone on one of these BMWs. So for Rafael Bayer, that is the end of the road for him. Right as he got before the mark of that last lap. We also got word out of Casey Miles that he has been brought in an emergency stop. So the 96 could also be out of this race for the very same reasons as both hit the cars of Stoltz and now Bayer. Bayer very nearly hit Steven Sutton there. That was a bit dicey between the pair of them. But you can see he's still trying to point that wheel. And actually it's fully locked right. The car's turning left. So that really does give you the scope as to what's going on here for Rafael Bayer. These aren't celebrations. These are the death thrashes of that 28 with a completely shattered steering system. I have never seen damage get that severe. I never saw it in GT3, and I sure as hell have never seen it in GT4, but these BMWs seemingly are made out of glass and paper mache to have one knock with the wall at Tiergarten, and the entire steering system has completely collapsed. Look at this here. So he's fully locked to the right there. You can't turn the car any further to the right. The car's still hooked all the way to the left. That's 3 cars in this race to have severe damage to that steering system. First it was Stoltz, now it's Bayer, and it's also been Mals. That's 3 cars out of this race on steering failure alone. For Wells, it's a free top 5. Let's get a look inside the top 3 as we see Mr. Scallops, the worst has come to pass here as Asahi Ota is now in fighting range. We are looking on the final lap here of round 1 of the Carousel Cup as we stay on board with Mr. Scallops in the defending fight of 2nd place. 8.2 seconds up the road. Matthew Copsey looks to take this one all the way to the checkered flag to win in the opening round of the Carousel Cup, but of course a long way away from that right now. Let's not be too certain on these things, as we've seen already how south the race can go for so many. We saw it very early doors in this race when the race leader Pascal Stoltz was into the wall down through Tiergarten and his entire race collapsed in the span of a single lap. The 96 is in. The 28 is still struggling to find his way in, so we don't know the current condition right now. No reports from the pit lane on the 28 of Raphael Bayer, who had that serious knock-in with the wall at Tiergarten, has completely collapsed his steering system. And it does leave us with very few notes here as to what the current fate of the 28 is. By looks of it, that would look to be as he's into the pit lane somehow, and I am baffled by that one. He was able to get the car to coax itself into the pit lane. That could be the end of the road for the 28. Raphael Bayer, sadly, after what was looking at a top 5 finish today, one incident has completely waylaid his chances, by looks of it, to even finish at all. Watching here, though, with Mr. Scallops, he has definitely got quite the weight now pressing down on him, because right behind is the 54 of Asahi Ota. Lurking, but into the wall there, a little touch of the grass. So grass has been a serious affecting factor over the course of this race, and that may have just given him the deciding factor on his fight of 2nd place. Aero wash affecting the nose of the 54s. We make our way down towards, this is the run in towards Veersiphon. One tiny bit of the grass, he was basically sucked into the wall. There was nothing that Ota could have done in that situation. So that fight of 2nd has quickly dissolved for Mr. Scallops. He holds on to 2nd place as of right now. You can see the distance now having opened up tenfold between himself and Asahi Ota. Now 2.3 seconds on what was previously 0.2 of a second. Right now up the road, still 9 seconds clear. Matthew Copsey leading in this race. Right now he'll be definitely a lot more nervous, seeing how quickly the race has descended for so many, knowing that one slip could undo what has been an hour's worth of progress for him. He makes his way currently down through the Kesselchen. For Copsey, he is just, looking at it here, just about half a lap before the checkered flag. He's just got to play this one very safe. He's got 10 seconds to Mr. Scallops, who himself, I want to point out, has now dropped back time considerably to Asahi Ota. It's 0.4 of a second between the pair. Ota is immediately back into the fight here, so you could definitely make the suggestion, with the gap having dropped away from the leading two as opposed to the back of the podium, that Ota has sort of been given a bit of a deus ex here, as Scallops seems to have ran into his own sort of problems just before the run to Stylestrecken. In towards the Carousel. The last time here for round 1, we're at the Carousel in the Carousel Cup before we move over to GT4s for round 2. And let's see how they take it. And that is just beautiful. Just beautiful. You know what? I'm so happy with that. Let's get a look on the replays. You'll see there in the bottom right is still the live footage of that fight for 2nd place. They make their way up towards Hohe 8. But just look at that. That was silky. Just silky. And we are going to make a consistent habit of showing you footage of Carousel over the course of this championship. I think it's only fitting with a name like the Carousel Cup that we ought to give due course towards that corner. That was just, it was too smooth. So heading in towards, by looks of it here, the runs towards Eschbach and Brünchen before we head in towards the first of the two Flansgartens. Little bit of understeer there. Asahi Ota really wrestling the controls of his 54 to keep it in the fight here with Mr. Scallops' 394. They make their way through Brunchen now into towards Icekova. Bear in mind, not far up the road, and as mentioned before, one slip is all it would take to put the 97 in fighting range of these two. On the exit now of Icekova in towards Flansgart 9s, on the run towards Sprunghugel, you can see the final time for our M2s to take the leap through Sprunghugel, following front from back here. That was full air time. That was properly off of the ground there, all four wheels for Asahi Ota. That was definitely a little bit of a heart in the throat moment for him. He makes his way now through Flansgart and Spy. And that's just, it's dropped a little bit of that time away between himself and Mr. Scallops, because he just had to readjust from momentarily being an aircraft here at the Nordschleife. Heading down towards the Schwalbenschwanz, here we go. Ota still in pursuit of Scallops. These two looking to take this all the way to the line, because they still find themselves in viable slipstream range as they head down towards the Dottinger Hohe. Here comes the Kleine Karussell. Quite literally a translation of the little carousel. Heading towards Galgenkopf we go then. We'll be catching on board with the 97 towards the checkered flag in a moment's time, as it does look to be payday here for Matthew Copsey. Had a lightning start of this race to take what looks to be the race win here in round one, but we're still watching to see how the saga unfolds between these two. Is it going to be close enough for Asahi Ota and Mr. Scallops? Only time will tell us different. We take a look onto our overhead monitors here, as we are not far from getting on board with the 97, who's currently down through Antoniusbucher down towards Tiergarten. We want to see how does it all end here between Ota and Scallops. It might just be too far away. Scallops might have just done enough here in the Nordschleife, but let's cut away from these two as they make their way out of Antoniusbucher down towards Tiergarten. Is it too far away? Because heading to the line in a moment's time, we see down towards Tiergarten, just seeing on the exit of Tiergarten down towards the line, here comes Matthew Copsey at the very end of the first round of the championship here in the Karussell Cup. He wins in the M2 division. Let's see how it ends though between these two. It is a drag race to the line with Ota in pursuit of Scallops. It'll be down to tenths of a second for the checkered flag, and across the line it's less than a tenth, 92 thousandths, almost the all-time record for the closest finish. I still think that resides at 75 thousandths. And that was over on the Sunday League, if I'm not mistaken, as well. What a result between Ota and Scallops. A very, very solid podium we see here for Thomas Ferre heading to the line. He'll be in the top 5. Currently looking to finish things in 4th place. A solid result here, having surfed the madness of round 1 in the number 84. Sees the checkered flag, 4th place for Thomas Ferre. Bear in mind, we do have what seems to be an end session timer already underway, and that does create a little bit of an issue for the drivers much further down the order, as it will preemptively end the race, leaving them in the positions they are now. But fortunately, none of them are fighting, so not that it's going to greatly affect where it stands for them. We see to the line then a good result for Tom Wells. He entered this session from 11th place on the grid, but finishes in the top 5. I'd say you're looking at a very likely vote of driver of the day there for Tom Wells. A very solid drive from the back of the field, and I would say it's a bit of a coin toss here between Copsey and Wells. If you do just give me a moment. That's a pity. I was looking for a coin. I was actually going to do a physical coin toss, but I'd say we're going to have to possibly give that one, by nature of progress there, to Tom Wells. Started from 11th to 5th in this race, missed out on qualifying. What a turnaround for Wells in today's race. That was really quite something, but even more so for Matthew Copsey. A race win on debut to the Karussell Cup. The M2s gave us a very bizarre concoction here in round 1 of the championship. Mr. Scallops and Asahi Ota, a very honourable mention for those driver of the day picks, because they just had some of the best fights in today's race right towards the very end. Now, I'd say the best fight was a while back. It was Ota, I think it was Ota, Ferre and Mason, or it was either that or Ota, Mason and Copsey, or Ota, Mason and Stoltz. But there were so many of those fights at very early doors in the race that were fantastic. But what a way to end the race as well for them. Across the line a moment ago, Stephen Sutton to 6th place here at the end of round 1, not far from the line. So it seems actually in the pit lane then is Anthony Villorio for what appears to be 7th. Rafael Bayer currently on his way back out onto the field. somehow a lap down here, is still looking to finish the race, but he won't have the time to do so. Casey Miles is nearest to the line, but still on his way in towards Schwalben-Schwanz, and that's a huge knock for him there. Surely that's the end of the road. No, he is not giving up here. He's already had too many trips to the pit lane. He is adamant to see the end of this race. It has definitely been a bizarre one for Miles, but he is looking to see that checkered flag. But has fate perhaps ripped that one away from him? You can see sort of a bit of a uneasy step there back onto the track. Could suggest some issues with the steering system. We'll wait for that final session marker though. But the bottom line, Matthew Copsey wins in round 1 of 3 of the HCCL Karussell Cup. Was it Mr. Scallops, I should say, in second place, with Asahi in third. Thomas Ferro fourth, Tom Wells fifth, Stephen Sutton sixth. By the looks of it here, Anthony Valorio seventh, Rafael Bayer in eighth, and Casey Miles in ninth. We'll wait for that final session marker to come up, because it will be showing up in a moment's time. It's happened every time we've been here at the Nordschleife, but a very, very bizarre race indeed. Some uneasy circumstances to have given us this first race today. And with the hopes then that the next 2 rounds will not have the same issues that today's race has had in the nature of the PSN issues. Of course, the race control has made that statement. We'll bring it back up here right at the very end of the race, but that race control statement is due to the issues surrounding PSN. A drop round is introduced for the Karussell Cup. This is to help a lot of the people who have missed out on the opportunity to race today. So for the majority of the grid, this will be a drop round for them. The other 2 rounds will count towards their championship. For the drivers who've shown up today, it will still constitute as whatever their worst result of the 3 races have been, as per the regulations for any kind of drop round introduction. So definitely a bizarre one, to say the least, folks. We still wait for that official result. Casey Miles finishes the race in 9th place. Rafael Bayer is out onto another flying lap here somehow. Actually, no, not sorry, not Rafael Bayer. It was, that one was already pretty self-explanatory. We saw him on the GP circuit. He is functionally in 8th place. Anthony Valorio in 7th. There you can see is your front row right across from one another at this time. Matthew Copsey and Mr. Scallops, with Asahi fighting back to 3rd place. It's been a bit of a roller coaster here on a smaller grid than expected, but one that is still provided on a great ensemble of races today here at the first round of the Karussell Cup. We still see with Rafael Bayer, he's out on track. Realistically, doesn't have to do anything else now. Could retire to the pits. It wouldn't make much of a difference. He is still scheduled to finish in 8th place. And I think fate has a way of working wonders, because that's a huge knock for him down at Adenauer. And that's a spin for Bayer. I think that's the one thing keeping the session from ending right now, is waiting on Bayer to do a lap. We are just waiting for that full result to come through, because we do want to see exactly how all of it pans out. In terms of where we'll be in the next couple of rounds, the next round is scheduled to go ahead on December 6th, 2025. That'll be 75 minutes of racing, an hour and 15, with the GT4s, of which we have come to know and love here on HCCL over the course of the previously ran GT4 Challenge Series. That was won by Christian LeBay with Chevrolet. In round 3 will be the season finale of the Karussell Cup, taking us in towards just before the charity event the week after. For the 2.4 hours of Spa. That's round 3 on December 13th for the GT3s, an hour and a half here at the Nürburgring. Well, without much left to say then, we still wait to see what the final verdict is, with some drivers actually making their way back out on track. There's Anthony Valorio on his way out. We still wait for that final session timer. as it's definitely been a little bit on the longer side of things. We already start to see drivers dropping away, so now we are forced to wait here until we have a comprehensive look at the final driver standings. This is for the sake of notes taking, and it's also for the sake of data collection for the race organisers. Of course, all of the results will be posted up on SimGrid as per any kind of rulings as well post-race for penalties or drop points therein. I think realistically here, not much is scheduled to change. The Wells are saying if Bayer gets to the end, he beats Valorio. So that might be the reason why Valorio has now come out of the pit. So that we do find ourselves seemingly on a last lap dash here, or a post-lap dash between these two. So it is a bit of a bizarre one we're seeing. It's now currently down through Stahlstrecke. They're both on lap 7 just now, and that's another spin for Raphael Bayer. Surely something's got to give here with that 28. He has taken so much punishment over the course of the race. You can see car was almost beached up on the curbs there at Stahlstrecke. In towards Karussell, we've seen repeated issues in there. He's already understeered all the way off and come to a full stop. What is the going rate here for Raphael Bayer? Somehow is he going to find a way to keep going here in that M2? I think it's seen its day. Something is not right there. He can't get the car moving. Oh, he's gotten the car fired back up again. Something is wrong with Raphael Bayer's BMW. This is possibly the most bizarre incident I think we've ever seen. We'll stay on board with him here. We'll be back in just a moment's time. This is perhaps the most bizarre incident I've ever seen. It's hard to make sense of it because what it appears to be right now, because these two drivers have only just got onto that final lap, the race is not yet considered fully over. Hence why we aren't getting a comprehensive breakdown of the final standing results, because we don't have all of the final standing results. So two drivers still having yet made their way to the checkered flag, namely Raphael Bayer and Anthony Valorio. Now, this is in the fight right now for 7th place. Both of them have to get to the line here. And with Bayer on his way currently down through toward the run of it here at Sprunghögel, we've already seen troubles aplenty for that 28, but I think Bayer is adamant on the convictions he can get that 28 to the checkered flag. And bear in mind, he's not actually too far from it now. He's in through Flansgarten Zwei on his way towards the Schwalbenschwanz. This is a very dicey section of the track so far for the M2s, even in a decent condition. So for Bayer, who has really seen the blunt end of it on that BMW, he has seen thick and thin in today's race. The question therein remains is, can he make his way to the checkered flag? Or is he going to be finding himself a victim of the very same section that put him down in 7th place with catastrophic steering damage? Oh, we're not far from it. Heading out through Galgenkopf now. Here's Raphael Bayer. And definitely one of the more bizarre things. It's a race almost after a race, a post-race, as one could say here. But Bayer finds himself swerving down the Dottinger Hohe. This is a very bizarre one. What is he doing now? This is very bizarre. Oh, he's swerving. He's swerving. Look, there's still half of the straight left to go here. What is Raphael Bayer doing? This is just a bit... It's a bit bizarre. It is a bit bizarre, to say the least. Not a clue what he's doing. We cut away from him to see what Anthony Valorio's up to. He's on his way currently down through Bergwerk in the forest section before he makes his way onto the straightaways down at Kesselchen. He might run out of time to get to the line if he keeps messing about, says Tom Wells in chat. Yeah, that's what we're worried about. That's what we've been egging these drivers on with, is whether or not they want to call it now, because it's not going to do a great heap to change their current position. Moreover, the end of session timer is still creeping up on them. Now, we don't know what it was set to, as it can actually be decided in the server code as to how many minutes you want to allot to the end of session timer. I assume the folks at HCCL have set this one relatively high up because of the nature of the Nordschleife and the fact that we do find ourselves in situations like this. And it seems now at journey's end here for the number 28, Raphael Bayer, on his way to the line on what I must say is definitely the most bizarre final laps of any race I've ever seen. Down to the line comes the 28 to 7th place at the end of round 1. Or so I'm led to believe, because now he's doing a whole song and dance of getting the car slowed down right before the checkered flag. Well, we're just going to wait then. Obviously, with all due respect, you've taken way too long now. Patience has run absolutely paper thin there. Now back on board with Anthony Valorio on his way out past towards the run to Hohe Acht. Got a rough estimate as to what I think he's trying to do here. I think Bayer is just waiting at the checkered flag, waiting for Valorio, and then he's just going to cross the line right at the last second. Thank you. There we go. That was taking way too long. Now we see the final results. Bayer 7th and Valorio in 8th. Casey Miles in 9th. 2 DNFs from Pascal Stoltz and James Mason. Oh, that's the end of the road here for round 1 of the championship. Definitely the most bizarre end to any race I've ever seen, but that's the end for round 1. It's been an unorthodox start and an even more unorthodox end. Taking a look as to where we'll be next with the Karussell Cup, it'll be December 6th for round 2 with the GT4s, a 75-minute race here in the Nürburgring Nordschleife. That's the end of the road, though, for round 1. That's all from us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care and good night.